Okay, let's come back to order committee. First item for our consideration, K-12 school facilities end of session summary. Tanya and Matt, thank you for your willingness to walk us through what we've done. Sometimes we need to be reminded of what we did.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tanya Heitrick, Legislative Service Office, Operations Administrator. I also am legal counsel for the various education committees. And actually, Matt Wilmarth and I are here for questions and a bit of support, but Ashley Phillips is going to walk you through this.
Well, Ashley, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Ashley Phillips, Legislative Editor, Legislative Service Office. I'm just going to provide a brief summary of the laws enacted by the legislature during the 2025 general session that impact K-12 school facilities and, and capital construction. To start, two bills that were sponsored by the Select Committee were enacted into law. Those are Chapter 89, K-12 school facilities leasing, which amends the lease reimbursement to be the lesser of the total lease amount or the average cost per square foot for comparable facilities multiplied by the allowable educational square feet. The second one is Chapter 145, K-12 school facilities maintenance and appropriations. That statute now amends, that bill amended the routine and major maintenance calculations. It increased the allowable square feet from, I have been sick recently, from 115% to 135% of the School Facilities Commission's adequacy standards for school year 25-26 only. It also increased the cost replacement formula multiplier from 2% to 2.5%, beginning school year 25-26 and continuing. Chapter 145 also appropriates $38.1 million for increased major maintenance payments, and increases to routine maintenance will be allocated by the Department of Education. The next bill that passed is Chapter 118, K-12 school facilities appropriations, which was sponsored by the House Appropriations Committee. Excuse me. That bill appropriated $29.8 million for component level projects, approximately $14.4 million for construction and demolition costs of a Campbell One transportation facility, approximately $150 million for design, construction, site preparation, and demolition of a high school in Campbell One, and $20 million of which was effective immediately, and the rest will be effective on March 15th of 2026. Approximately $11.7 million was appropriated for unanticipated costs. Chapter 118 also reappropriated up to $13.4 million for inflationary costs for approved projects. And it directs the State Construction Department and School Facilities Commission to study the authority of the department to direct expenditures and supervise K-12 major maintenance projects and potential impacts on the department and school districts. The report due under that requirement is due by October 1st to the Joint Appropriations Committee and this committee, beginning of year 2025 and through 2031. Next is Chapter 12, which is Public Property and Buildings Amendments, sponsored by the Joint Appropriations Committee. That bill actually affects all state-owned buildings. It requires the State Construction Department to develop a 20-year strategic plan, monitor and report on capital construction, major maintenance, and routine maintenance, and it standardizes definitions and processes for terms throughout the state and state building construction. Chapter 24 is the last one that was enacted, which is charter school leasing, sponsored by Senator Driscoll. That bill repealed the requirement for charter schools to receive lease reimbursement that the State Construction Department must determine that there are no adequate and available spaces within the resident school district. There were two bills sponsored by the Select Committee during the 2025 general session that were not enacted into law. Those are House Bill 21, School Finance, Routine Maintenance Worker Calculation, and House Bill 142, Supplemental K-12 School Facilities Appropriation. Projects funded in Chapter 118 that was sponsored by the House Appropriations Committee does include those projects included in House Bill 142. And with that, we'll stand for any questions.
Ms. Phillips, thank you. House Bill 21, can you remind me, that was not picked up in the subsequent rewrite of a bill by appropriations, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. There were no changes that aligned with those recommended in House Bill 21.
And Mr. Chairman, just to give you a little bit of background, that was a very nuanced change to the routine maintenance calculation within the education resource block grant model. It would have repealed the factor of operations expenditures utilized as one of four factors in the maintenance worker calculation. It would have aligned that formula to what was recommended by your consultants in the 2020 recalibration. Very nuanced, very specific bill there. It would have increased funding to approximately, I think, $5 million. And I think the will of the legislature said, we'll just deal with this in the recalibration effort that's being undertaken this interim.
Yeah, that's helpful, Matt. Thank you very much. Questions for Ms. Phillips or for Tanya or Matt? Okay, really appreciate it, guys. We will continue to move on. We've got a hefty agenda, and I'm going to ask committee that everyone be cognizant of that, and to all of our friends out across the room, let's just remember we've got a lot of things to cover today. Let's be on point, get all the work done, learn a lot together, and we'll just keep moving. So I'm going to go ahead. Committee will plan to take a break at 10 o'clock, but let's get started with updates from our State Construction Department. So Director McComey, Ms. Carlson. That's the governor calling. Chairman Tarter, good to see you. Thank you for being here today. Our commission president, John, good to see you too. Director, take it away and give us an update from the
Okay, thank you very much.
way, and thank you for being back among us.
Yep. Pleasure to be here today, Mr. Chairman. I'm Del McComey. I'm the director with State Construction Department. I have with me today Shelby Carlson. She's the administrator for the School Facilities Division of the department, and John Rexis is our project manager, handles all of the, we've got 5 project, right now we've got 2 project managers. We have 2 vacant positions that we're hoping to fill here the next week or 2, but John oversees the project managers and all the construction work around the state for us. And of course, our chairman, Jack Charter with the commission. We also have a couple of commissioners in the back there that I'm sure if asked would weigh in on anything, but good to see them here today also. So,
Director, thank you for that. I didn't mean to ignore a couple other commissioners that are with us, so thank you for reminding us. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you.
okay, Shelby, I think John's up. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, John Rexis, Project Management Supervisor for the School Facilities Division. I'm going to give you some updates.
John, would you pull that close to you, please? Thank you very much.
How's that? Is that any better? Thank you. I'm going to give you some updates on some of our current ongoing projects. I'll try to be as brief and concise as I can, but I am going to pause in between each project to allow you to ask questions as necessary. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right into the 10 Sleep K-12 replacement project. $2.5 million was appropriated for design in the 2020 budget session. $30 million appropriated for design, construction, and demolition in the 2022 budget session. Inflationary funds in the amount of $1,187,155 were approved to supplement the project. The project is now 92% complete in regards to the actual building, and the district did occupy the new building in January of 2025. Final completion for demolition and site remediation were scheduled for June of 2025. However, after the abatement started on that, there was some other asbestos-containing materials that were identified where testing had not been previously performed. And we're in the process right now of working through that issue and trying to get some additional abatement contractors on site so that that project can still be finished this fall. Moving on to the Riverton High School auditorium, $8.2 million was appropriated for design and construction in the 2022 budget session. Inflationary funds in the amount of $1,122,338.32 were approved to supplement the project. The project is now 85% complete based on expenditures. However, it is projected to be, the building itself is projected to be finished either early this month or with some site work still to remain. So they're slightly behind schedule, but still in plenty of time for the district to be able to use that building this fall.
So, John, just a quick question on the auditorium over there. It felt like it took quite a while to get underway with that. Has it always been projected for completion this spring, or are we just running behind on this?
Mr. Chairman, that is the original completion date. That project is a construction manager risk project, and Sampson Construction's been on that, and it's, by my estimation, a successful project so far. So
Okay, good deal.
we're really close, and no major hiccups on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the Little Powder K-8 project. And I'm just going to skip over a lot of this background information. I would say that the construction contract was awarded to Van Ewing Construction in the amount of $9,808,714. Currently, the project is 40% complete based on expenditures. The scheduled substantial completion for this project is for November of 2025. However, I would say it appears like we're slightly ahead of schedule. And I think they're anticipated to move in at fall break as opposed to Christmas break this year. Moving on to the old.
Good news, by the way. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
That's good news, by the way.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
if I might,
Senator.
on this particular one, what was really the, why are we almost 3 times the original projected amount?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Geringer. I think there was a little bit of a disconnect between whether or not the existing facility was going to be replaced as it stood and what the current design guidelines recognize as adequate for a rural community school. And so I would also say that it was a little bit further complicated by the fact that, and this predates me a little bit, I was still with the department, but not in this particular role, but it appears that there was some additional square footage that was granted based on enrollment projections, and the budget was never adjusted to accommodate that additional square footage for the students that were projected further down the road. Usually, we look about 8 years down the road on our enrollment projections, and we tried to size the school for that. So it was a combination of a lot of different things, and ultimately, the district was able to come forward and justify the need for some of the accommodations at that building, and because it's rural, in a location where we had a very difficult time finding contractors that were willing to do the work. If you're not familiar with the area, it's about 45 miles north of Gillette. And there's just no place for anybody to stay at a hotel, so everybody's commuting every day on that, and that has a tendency to increase our costs as well.
Okay.
So kind of a lot of different factors involved there.
Representative, follow-up?
No, sir, Kane.
Anything else on that one? Okay, please continue. Mr. Rexis, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I seem to have lost track where I'm on the Old Slade demolition project. Funds were appropriated for designing and demolition in the 2024 budget session. The design was awarded to a RET Design Group in December of 2024. And the project has been bid out. It's slightly over budget, I'd say, by about $25,000, $26,000 on the construction hard bid. And the district has had approval of that bid through their board, and we're currently in the contracting phase for that project. So we anticipate that contract will be awarded within the next week or two, and they can start tearing down that building. Okay, Mr. Chairman, moving on to the Campbell Transportation Building, funds were appropriated.
Real quickly, just a question on these demolitions. Is the biggest impediment usually involve hazardous materials? Is that really what bogs us down on some of those? And what do you run into on these demolitions? I'm just curious. There's a lot of buildings out across that we still haven't gotten to. We've never decided to demolish them, and I'm just trying to figure out in my mind why and what we might run into if we decided to do that sort of thing. So,
Mr. Chairman, I would say that there's a number of factors with that as well. Sometimes it can be extremely difficult for a community to let go of a building that they've got emotional ties to and a lot of history with. Sometimes there's complexities with the abatement where there's asbestos-containing materials that aren't readily identified.
yeah.
And it's difficult to build lead and lag times into your schedule to account for some of that. And once that cycle and that sequence is upset, you almost have to reset the entire schedule based on when you can get some of these abatement crews back in. And that has complications because a lot of our demolition contractors already have a full dance card, so to speak. And so they have to shuffle to try to figure out when they can get back to the site and when they can get it in. So, in those instances where we do come across those types of materials, it's just difficult to get the project back up and running again. The other thing I would say too is, in addition to the emotional ties to some of these buildings, a lot of the times the communities want to use them for other purposes. And that can take quite a bit of discussion to work through to determine what's appropriate and what's in the best interest of the state.
Thank you, John. That's helpful. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Director.
Another note on that, we see some real fluctuations in the pricing for demo. And part of that's just the type of contractors we have and the number of contractors, as John mentioned, they have an awful lot of ongoing work right now. So if you look at the Riverton Tax Center, that particular gentleman that does demo also recycles everything. So when he's tearing that down, it's pretty interesting to watch, but he's taking every stick of rebar out, crushing that concrete down and doing all that. Then he takes the concrete and crushes it down, makes aggregate. So he recoups a lot of his cost. So if we can get him on a job, we'll see his price maybe half of what other people are that are just tearing it down and hauling it off and not resalvaging and selling all those materials. But he's one person, he's full. So if he happens to get one of our jobs, goes good for us, but if he doesn't. So you see these prices that are kind of hard to judge. And then asbestos, depending on the type of asbestos and what needs to be done, can also really fluctuate those costs. So in Tennis Sleep, for example, we went in and did the review of the building. The team went in and looked at, not us, but a consultant went in and did the survey of the building. And what slowed this down is when they started tearing the building down, doing the demo on the building, they found some spray that was on the block that was underneath the painted sections, but not within the whole building. So where they did do some testing, but where they did that testing, that spray wasn't on that particular part of the block. And, the building's, I think that thing's almost 80, 90, 100 years old. At what point and why did they spray just a part of the block in one section of the building? Who knows? So there was that was done, but then it was discovered that the spray coating on the block under paint. And so that's some of the things you run into when you start tearing down the old buildings.
Well, not to belabor, but it just makes me scratch my head how that would even become friable. I mean, it just seems to me like just demolish it and get out of there, but.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so a lot of times you'll find the mastic that holds the tile down or the tile itself, and it is determined to be asbestos. But as long as you keep it waxed and you're not tearing it up, it's not considered friable. But the second you start to take it up, that's when it becomes friable. So in this case, it wasn't a friable material because it was stuck to the block but under paint. But the minute we started the demo, that now you start breaking stuff apart, you can get that to let loose, and then it becomes friable, and so you gotta take it as friable material.
Thank you, Director. Go ahead, Mr. Alexis. Anything? Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up next is the Campbell Transportation Building. Funds were appropriated in the 2025 general session to supplement design funds that came out of the 95 million bucket that was granted to us in the 2023 general session, and remaining project funds from the original project back in the 2015 general session, excuse me. The most cost-effective remedy study, or MERCER, MCER, was presented and approved by the School Facilities Commission in October of 2023. The State Construction Department has proposed that let me back up for just a minute, Mr. Chairman. We are at 10% schematic design on that, and the cost estimate at 10% was substantially higher than what our budget allowed for. So we're proposing that we move forward to 35% so that we have a little more design development and we can get a little better cost estimating on that design. At the same time, we'd like to perform that value engineering at 35% when the design is a little more developed so that we can identify any enhancements that might be in that or any cost-saving measures that might help us align with the budget for this particular project. The district is also working with us right now, along with the design consultant, to identify any cost savings potential or avenues for supplemental funding on this that may include unanticipated funds or inflationary funds. But I think we still have a ways to go before we have a discussion about adding to the cost of this project. So we're just trying to get a little further down the road to see what we can do and where we're at and if we're short.
Madam Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that was my question on this. I know the original bid was quite a bit higher than what was currently appropriated. So I'm understanding you're working with the district to maybe find some cost estimates on how to better that. But I think it did come in quite a bit more from the bid that I saw that was several years old, so. And did that have something to do with maybe site change as well? Because I think we moved the site,
I'm sorry, did it have something to do with?
the site change where they were going to actually build it.
Mr.
Mr.
Rectus, go ahead.
Chairman, Representative Angelos, I'm not sure it had so much to do with the site change, although I would say that soil conditions can add to the cost of a project substantially. But most of the soil conditions in that area are poor anyway, regardless. I can't remember exactly what the previous site soil conditions were like, but my understanding is that the district was having some difficulties with the city and county and getting that previous site rezoned and approved. And so they moved on to the new site. But again, I think we just need to see where we can make adjustments to get the most value for the district on this particular building without them having to sacrifice anything that we would consider to be an adequacy type issue. Transportation facilities and bus maintenance facilities are not something that we typically do a lot of. And so we've got, I would say, a dated set of design guidelines for that probably need to be reworked. And it's our intention to focus on that as soon as we complete the educational building design guidelines and the adequacy standards. But for this project, I think that it will be good for us to sit down and determine what's necessary, what's appropriate, and what does the district need so that we can do a better job of budgeting for these types of things and outlining what's acceptable and what's considered to be an enhancement on these types of facilities.
Mr. Chairman, another item that's a big ticket dollar amount in this that I think was missed in the Mercer study was some of the site work itself in the pavement. So if you can imagine a facility, and I think they have, the districts here, they could give me the right number, but I think they have like 158 buses alone. So when you have the parking lot to store 158 buses, and then all the bus drivers come in, so you got 158 cars they got to have and that kind of stuff. So when you look at square foot per building, keep in mind in the future, that's going to be different number than we typically see with a high school or an education. So we'll roll, right now we're looking at say 550 square foot, dollars per square foot for a educational building. But they don't have these probably bigger than Walmart parking lots attached. And so depending on, again, the site conditions, the soil profiles, that's one of the things we've met with the district and talked about is, and again, it's going to come down to the geotech and that kind of stuff, but in that cost, that original cost you're referring to, there's a lot of dollars tied up in plant mix pavement and the sub base. So what is that true thickness supposed to be? And the difference between 4 inches and 6 inches of plant mix, literally in that size, can be millions of dollars for that parking lot. So I think one of the things that we need to focus on in this department, if we start doing some of these transportation facilities, and again, when I was director previously, I can't think of a single one we had built a new transportation facility during that time period, and then these are the first ones we're doing now in Jackson and in Gillette. I think when we provide the information to the legislature, the commission and the governor's office, we probably almost need to break that into two components. Here's the price per square foot for the facility, and here's the price for the site, because you get covers for the buses. The current guidelines say you need 50% of that of coverage for those buses. Well, 158 buses and you're covering, have some cover when they're out there is, I mean, that's big bucks there too. So, and it's not part of the building, it's part of the site work. So I think to give you a better understanding of how that comes about as we do more of these, because I think there's like 5 of them we're looking at around the state. When we're hitting those dollars, I think it'll give you a better understanding, explanation of what the true costs are for those facilities.
That's helpful, Director. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions on the bus barn? Go ahead, Mr. Rex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to the replacement for Campbell County High School. $7,605,809 was funded in a 2024 budget session for the actual design, not the entirety of the design phase, though. $20 million was appropriated in the 2025 general session to supplement the rest of the design phase and for demolition, site preparation, and construction. The total project costs include inflation, but not abatement of hazardous materials, which will be requested once the cost is identified. We wanted to make sure that we got our consultant in there to account for the quantities and the amounts of asbestos-containing materials so that we could put a cost to that. And instead of either having to come back for supplemental funding or asking for an excessive amount of funding that wasn't necessary. The Mercer was presented and approved by, and I guess I should say the most cost-effective remedy, the MCER, was presented and approved by the School Facility Commission in December of 2024. And design is currently in the contracting stage. Any questions about Campbell County High School?
John, what's the square footage now of the Campbell County High School? Just a wag or close
It's
to?
a little over 300, the current one is a little over 300,000 square foot.
And we'll go down
And
to
the-
190.
Yeah, and so it's gonna, there's about, both Rock Springs and Campbell are at that 300,000 square foot plus, and they're both gonna be down in that 200,000. So there's about 100,000 less square foot in the new buildings. And of course, that'll affect your major maintenance payments and those sort of things in the future. And it'll also affect, and we'll get into this a little bit later in some of the discussions, Mr. Chairman, but it'll also affect the calculations on excess square footage. And that was part of the bill that we discussed last year with this committee on how we look at that, so.
Okay, thank you. Please continue, Mr. Rutgers. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our elementary school replacement funds in the amount of $41.7 million for design, construction, contingency, and soft costs were appropriated in the 2024 budget session and will need to be supplemented with funds of $3.5 million from the $95 million bucket that was received in the 2023 general session due to upsizing of the facility and inflationary considerations. The most cost-effective remedy was presented and approved by the School Facility Commission in November of 2024. Design has been awarded to Stasis Design out of Cheyenne in March of 2025, and the consultant is currently working on the conceptual design and holding charrettes with the district.
Please continue.
Mr. Chairman, the next one's a very interesting project, but it's also an elementary school in the South Triad of Cheyenne for Laramie County School District 1. It's a reconfigured 5th and 6th grade elementary school. Funds in the amount of $54.9 million for design, construction, contingency, and soft costs were appropriated from the $95 million received in the 2023 general session. The most cost-effective remedy was presented and approved by the School Facility Commission in November of 2024. And the design is currently in the procurement phase. Interviews were held, and we're waiting for the district's board approval of the selected consultant so that we can initiate the contracting phase.
So, Mr. Rutgers, in keeping with tradition, we are hearing a lot about that one. We always hear a lot about Laramie 1, so are we still on track and are we good to go?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we lost a little bit of time on this one. This particular project was a prototype design, and the consultant that had completed the original design and the subsequent 5, 6 in the central triad had raised his fees substantially. So we had a lot of conversation with the Attorney General's office, and it was determined that we were the owners of those documents and that design. So we had to go back out through the procurement phase and put that on the street to find a consultant that was willing to work with that design to move forward at a fee that fit within the range that we felt was appropriate for that particular project. And I'm happy to say that we were able to save a substantial amount of money by selecting the firm that we're currently hoping to get board approval of.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you were referring to maybe some of the lawsuit going on with the Mercer study. Working with the Attorney General's office, we're just moving forward at this point in time with the project. Hopefully, we won't see any injunctions or anything to slow that process down. The lawsuit is really focused on a couple of existing school buildings in the central triad. And so hopefully these are both on the south triad, so that if something does come about, and you know, I don't have a crystal ball to try and forecast that, but if something does happen, hopefully it won't slow those two projects down in that other triad.
Thank you for that, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Representative.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to ask this question or who it should exactly be directed to, but do the Mercer studies take into account the increased transportation costs when we consolidate schools and start shipping kids to outside of neighborhood schools?
Mr. Chairman, it did. We worked with the district on that. They have a busing plan for doing that, and so that was part of the overall study, yes.
Anything further, committee? Okay, please continue, Mr.
Thank you,
Rogers.
Mr. Chairman. On to the replacement Rock Springs High School. Funds in the amount of $160 million for design, construction, contingency, and soft costs were appropriated in the 2024 budget session. The most cost-effective remedy study was presented and approved by the School Facility Commission in March of 2025. The district and state are currently procuring design and construction administration services for that project. And we anticipate that we should be able to execute a contract fairly soon. So we should be off and running on that particular project as well.
So, John, that was intended all along that be an extension of that satellite location, correct? And is that all online and good to go, or?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. In fact, there was a substantial amount of additional square footage that was previously designed that was not constructed when the satellite was constructed. So we're hoping to realize some economy on that design work that's already done. And that's what we're doing right now is we're in, I guess you could call it a negotiating phase with the architects of record for that particular project, just to see, you know, if we can agree and move forward and have them complete that design as well.
We had a lot of struggles with that one back when we were trying to set that one on the ground, and so I'm glad it's in place, and now maybe we can get the high school tagged onto it, but just hopefully we're good operationally over there to have a little smoother run this time. Yeah. Anything, Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question. I listened to the commission meeting on this particular school, and they were increasing the square footage of the school. And earlier you talked about the numbers and how you were looking at, there was an 8-year, I think was the average timeframe that they look at increasing enrollment, or they look at the enrollment numbers. So how does that data on the numbers of student and enrollment, who does that data, who does those projections for that?
Mr. Chairman,
Director?
we do those data on a yearly basis and you'll see this later on in the discussion on student population projections. And so we, with our planning group, do that internally. When we're doing a Mercer, both the consultant and our staff work together to look at those profiles and how that's looking. So across the state, one of the things you'll hear, I think Shelby will address it later, is that we still have a declining populations for the most part on schools. And we only have, I believe it's 8 districts now that have come back to their pre-COVID level in the state. And so on these particular ones, on the Mercers, we're going a little bit more in depth, and this is one of the things that we'll probably be coming back and addressing with this committee and with our the commission, is we want to change how we calculate student population. Right now, it's kind of a single line that we are using. Through the Mercer processes, what we've found is there's a lot more data that we can gather. And so there's 4 or 5 different types of gathering that information, then you can blend those together, and hopefully that'll give us a better projection into the future. We are allowed beyond this single type of cohort population study where we look back at how many students are there, look at where the trend is currently, and then project that into the future. We can, by rule and reg and statute, look at additional information also. But on our annual, so you'll find that you will get a detailed report on the projection of every district and every school within that district every year. That'll be part of the annual report that I'll talk about a little bit later.
So Representative Bratton, follow up, you good? Good question.
Yeah.
Good question.
One of the other things, Mr. Chairman, that I wanted to kind of brief on these particular schools, the elementary schools and the high schools, is that, over the years, we've had a lot of discussion with this particular committee on sizing schools for the future. So these new buildings are actually designed to be able to add on for an additional student population, and it varies, but typically say 100 to 200 more students, depending on whether it's a big high school or a small elementary. You may not design it to be another 100. The Triad schools in the South Triad and Laramie have the ability to add on another 100 students on top of what we're currently building through the design to do those. But in addition to that, and Senator Office was one of the folks that have brought this up over the years, is as we've added on to these schools over their lifespan. So let's go back to Campbell and Rock Springs. Those schools, I think both of those had 3 additions added on. But in the past, what's happened a lot of times on these buildings is their core structure to the building, where they have their auditorium, where they have their lunchrooms and those sort of things, are in the center of the building. So when you're adding on, there's no way to expand that. And that was one of the things at Rock Springs. They'd have to have 6 lunch periods in the size of the lunchroom to serve that. And so what we're doing in these new designs is we're setting that up, that because we're also designing them for these additions, that we're giving them some additional square footage in the original build out for that additional added capacity that's being designed into that building in the future. But in some cases, Rock Springs, Campbell, 3 additions, not 1 addition. So we're also telling the consultants to design this square footage into the part of the building that you can add on, so it has exterior walls, for example. So if we need to expand, say we get a 2nd or 3rd addition in the future, we can just add on to that area, and so we have the proper size for cafeterias and those sort of things when we come in to do additions. And typically, I don't think that was ever thought of in the past, and it's become an issue for these schools as they stay online over the years. And so we're trying to think a little smarter and do some pre-planning on that. And again, that's been a discussion with this particular committee for quite a few years, and so we've incorporated that into the new designs.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Director. We have learned some things.
Hopefully, over 25 years,
Started with
Mr. Chairman.
Cali, I think, or anyway, way back there.
Yeah.
Mr. Rexis, please finish up. We're going to take a break right after you
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finally, we come to the Jackson, Wyoming Transportation Building. Funds in the amount of $17.5 million for design, construction, contingency, and soft costs were appropriated from the $95 million bucket received in the 2023 general session. The most cost-effective remedy was presented and approved by the School Facility Commission in October of 2023. Design was awarded to Doobie Mulder Architects in March of 2025, and I'm happy to say that the project just bid. We're waiting for board approval on that to move forward, but we did get a very good bid on that. So we're happy to say that we're under budget at this point on that project and moving forward.
That's good news. Thank you, Mr. Rex, on that one. We put boots on the ground last year, committee. The committee actually visited that facility. Senator Dockstader was alongside, and much needed building. So I'm glad that's on track. Any questions on any of these projects? Representative Garinger, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your presentation on this. You know, considering the cost overruns that we've seen on some of this stuff and just not accounting for some of the design that comes up, you know, like with the parking lot, the bus parking lot. What are we doing to incorporate that? And I appreciate that you learned the lesson with the cafeterias. What are we doing to incorporate these things that we learn into future operating procedure, into better project management and analysis, and even into the Mercers? What are we doing to account for that into the future?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, a couple of three things right off the top of my head. First, the department got out of sequence on the Mercer studies, and so there was projects that came up and were funded. So there was a $95 million block of funding that was provided. And so the department looked at, okay, this project, but there wasn't any Mercers done for those. Previously, you would do a Mercer study, which would drive out a lot of your costs, drive out a lot of these issues, and then you would ask for funding. And then the same thing happened 24 session, or let's see, 24 session. And so there was funding for those, but the Mercers were not done. The legislature in those two funding pots said, thou shall do some Mercer studies to justify the costs and whatever, but there was costs out there tied to those. So we're trying to get back into the sequence to where we're through the condition surveys, the capacity analysis, that we don't come to you or the commission until a Mercer is done for asking for those costs. So I think that's going to aid in bringing some of those costs back. We'll have more of the planning on the front end before we ever come and ask for some dollars. And I think it's a lesson learned, but for whatever reason, it got out of sequence for a couple of years in the funding requests from the legislature moving stuff forward on these projects. So for example, we had in Afton, Mr. Chairman, we've got a bus barn facility there that we looked at through the Mercer process. Well, the department at the time estimated that was going to be about $11 million project, but the Mercer hadn't been performed. So when we did the Mercer here recently on that job, we found we could do the work through more of a component type of project. And so it came out to about $800,000 instead of 11 million. And typically, again, a lot of you are new on the committee, but typically when we have savings on a job, and often we do, we return that back when that project's completed. That comes back and goes into the school foundation program. On that particular project, because we're going to use that money more in a component type of thing, once we get that out and we let it to bid, I don't want to hold on to 10 or 11 million dollars just sitting there for a year or two. We're going to accelerate turning some of these back, and we've got a couple of those projects that are moving forward in that similar manner. We're going to see some cost savings come back. So I think future planning is making sure we have the Mercer set on the front end before those costs we ever come and ask. We've got more planning into that. It's not design, it's not so those things, but it gives us a better picture on the threshold of what we should be actually asking for. The other thing that we're implementing right now is we've gone out and on the street and with an RFP, and we've hired a number of consulting firms that do cost estimating. So we're going to try and do more front-end cost estimating on these projects so that we can, because it varies around the state, as to what costs are. Jackson is substantially higher than Torrington, Wyoming, et cetera. So you can't just say schools are running at $550 square foot because it's different where they're at. And particularly, I don't want to take a lot more time because I know we got a lot to go, but take Gillette, for example. From my highway career, Gillette probably has the hardest time with aggregates for crush base and plant mix of anywhere in the state. I mean, we actually contemplated trucking it in from training it in, so when the coal trains went out, we'd bring in aggregate because we got to haul it 50, 60, 70 miles. Well, that adds an awful lot of cost. Well, that's in Gillette, but you can go to other places around the state where it's all rock and you can get a pit next door to your project and you can have a substantial difference in cost. So with having the cost estimators come on the front end of these, hopefully we can get a better handle on the costs also. And then I think the final thing that I think is lessons learned is really sitting down and analyzing what the intent of those projects are with the districts on the front end and trying to work through where we could do prototype. And again, there's been a lot of discussion with this committee over the years on prototype. People throw out prototype, but there cannot be a prototype building. And the reason is because you have difference in soils. So the foundation could be totally different in Gillette where the soils aren't the greatest and most of their bigger buildings have rammed pier aggregates or something like that versus, again, a place that has good soils, totally different cost. That could be millions of dollars depending on the size of that school for that alone. So I think going back through history now that we're building more schools and looking at areas around the state and what we run into can help us on that also.
Representative, follow-up? Are we good?
Mr. Chairman, I think one thing I might add to answer your original question is lessons learned and how do we capture those procedures. We're in the process of redoing our adequacy standards for the buildings right now, and we'll be doing the adequacy standards for bus maintenance facilities after we complete those. But as we look at redoing those, we'll bring up some of these things about moving the cafeterias and those common spaces that we want the ability to add on to in the future. We'll get that captured in those design guidelines as something that we look to do. So that's how we'll capture it going forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Good question. Go ahead, Representative, follow-up.
Yeah, really appreciate the answers, and that really helps me in understanding what you're doing from the Mercer on. But what about pre-Mercer? So what are we doing to capture some of these ideas that maybe need to be incorporated to maybe come out with a different conclusion from the Mercer? Something that you know, we can identify that says there is a more cost-efficient remedy to this solution if we had just incorporated this. Is there anything that we're doing to bring it back into that process?
Director, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, certainly there is. And again, it comes back to those design standards, the adequacy standards, those sort of things. So when we're required by statute to redo those every 4 years. So we're keeping a list of kind of how those things happen, what's going on with them. If you look at the timeline of a project, a lot of these projects from when you start them in the design to when they're built is 4 or 5 years. So in the timeline that we're going to build probably Gillette and Rock Springs, we're doing updating the standards now. This will happen over probably next year's time period. But then we'll move forward and those projects will just be finishing up and we're going to be going back and looking at that. So we try and incorporate that type of stuff into those design standards. One of the things that I'd offer up, again, an awful lot of new folks on the committee, is go to our website for school facilities and all of those design standards are there, the adequacy standards are there. All that stuff is listed out in the rules and regulations. So it'll really give you a good idea. And we've got a lot of things that, unfortunately, we got X amount of manpower. But I've got a lot of ideas on things that I want to try and do some updates on things that have been stagnant for a time period. Safety and security, 2015 is when that last review was done of the school buildings and the last review. We've had a couple of summits. We just had a summit this year because we want to go back and see what we can do, because technology, for example, has really changed in security. Some of the stuff on recent statutes, I think, is probably going to impact that. So I'd like to put a consultant back on in the security area and have them come and update it. That's something we're continually doing. We've got probably 3 or 4 different things we're working on right at this point, trying to update our standards and our policies and procedures. By statute, Mr. Chairman, we're supposed to come, and when we do these rule changes and regulations, we come to this committee and share those and get input from this committee when we're going through that process.
Director, thank you. I promised to break. We're going to break till 10:30. Thank you, Mr. Rexis, for walking us through these projects. We can come back with any questions you have, committee, after the break, but we're going to break till 10:30. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, nice to meet you. Oh, well, thanks.
Committee and associates, we're about 1 minute out. 1 minute. Started. Just give me a thumbs up, Ashley. Okay, we're back underway. Director, thank you for allowing me to take that break. More important to the chairman than the rest of the committee, but I will remind that our agenda does call for a visit about our charter schools at 11. I've got folks who've got to get on the road after that too, so let's try to chop through this as well as we can and aim for that 11 o'clock time period if we can. I also want to get to some public comment on this update from our agency folks. So take it away, Director.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn this over to Shelby for this portion of it, so.
Yeah, Ms. Carlson?
Yes,
Good
Mr.
morning.
Chairman. So I want to give you an update on the Mercer studies. These started with the 2023 session and based on the schedules, both condition and capacity, that were generated in 2023. So as you look down through that need column, anything that says condition capacity came through that process. Any of these that say adequacy is a special request we got after those condition and capacity lists to go in and take a look at those schools for the adequacy of the facilities. We started looking at a total of 28 facilities, 6 capacity, 17 condition, and 5 of those adequacy. We rolled those into 21 total Mercer studies. One of those Mercers covered actually 6 of the facilities that were noted for condition and/or capacity, and one is actually covering 2 facilities. We have 16 Mercers yet to be completed. If we look at that status column, anything that's really shown in that light pink is completed. The ones I've got highlighted in yellow, I'm anticipating will complete this summer. And so I think we're making pretty good progress that will cover an additional 7 buildings. When we went out on the street for our Mercers, we hired actually every consultant that put in a proposal with us. So we have 4 consultants, and we are actually looking to go back out on the street and see if we can generate some more interest. What we're seeing is generally a consultant's working on one of them at a time. So that kind of slows things down. They have limited staff as well, often just 1 or 2 people working on those. So we're going to go back out on the street, see if we can generate any more interest, see if we can get a few more consultants helping us to move these along a little quicker, because we do have some other identified facilities that we need to do Mercer studies on. I just don't have any capacity to put those into the mix right now. So that's kind of an update. I mean, we've finished 6, but covered a number of those facilities. We have 16 yet to go. We got those that I've got highlighted to complete this summer. And then I think a lot of these, the rest of them will go fairly quick. Again, we are seeing a lot of those like transportation facilities. There's a number of these, even one of the high schools that I really think when it's all said and done is going to come out more of like a component project rather than a full rebuild or something like that. I have refocused our consultants, so they're just focusing on those that already have or need to have a funding request this session. So I've tried to push those ahead with our consultants. Those that we already have funding in place for, I've slowed those down so that we can make that funding request this session. With those comments, I take any questions you might have.
So, Ms. Carlson, any concern, let me back up. I don't remember in all my time on school facilities select committee ever having this kind of load of Mercer studies. So given that, and we got a bunch of them, is there any concern that some of these are going to sit on the shelf and we're going to have to go back out and repeat the process and spend money in the future redoing Mercers? It just feels like an awful lot of Mercer studies going on. Can you help me with that?
Mr. Chairman, since I was here before, what we're seeing, I don't think we've ever carried 21 Mercers going on at one time. These used to be, the state funded them, the funding came through us, but the districts ran those Mercer studies. That has since moved over to the responsibility of the department. So we're trying to manage all of these. I don't think a lot of these already have some money allocated for them. There's certainly a chance that that would happen. I mean, we never know what the budget's going to look like, right, when we go out there. But I do think a lot of these are going to come in well under what we're anticipating, and maybe even the money that has already been appropriated for them. So certainly a concern, depending on how long we have to wait to get the funding to the buildings.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed, you guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll take agenda item number 5, updates. Again, this is on, as I talked about a little bit earlier, the 95 million appropriation. So this is the latest update that we have on that funding for that 95 million and how we're anticipating to allocate that. You'll note in here, as Shelby just discussed, there's an asterisk on a number of these projects, and those are Mercer studies that are in progress. And so Albany 1, replacement of their central kitchen, that is in progress right at this point in time. We're fairly far along on that one, and our consultant FEA is doing that particular Mercer. Campbell renovation on Conestoga Elementary. Again, the dollars that are shown here are for design only of that, but there's, that Mercer is underway. MGT is doing that one. They've been out and done a fair amount of work, and so MGT right now is focused on the Jackson High School Mercer right at this point in time, but we have tasked them with having the priority on Campbell, Conestoga for the next round of work that they're doing. Campbell County Transportation Facility, again, John talked about that earlier. That project is moving forward. And so there was money for the design portion of that project. Goshen County renovation on their elementary, middle school, high school, design-only funds. Again, that one has an asterisk, and so a Mercer is being conducted on that one also. The new 5-6 for Laramie 1. So almost $55 million has been allocated out of the 95 for that. And again, as Mr. Ruxis mentioned, we're currently, we've gone out and selected the designer for that particular project, and we're waiting for board action on that one. Replacement of ARP Elementary. Design, so we're looking at design dollars here, and again, that one's completed. So 3.4 million towards that ARP Elementary project. Again, Mr. Rex just updated on the status of that earlier. Niobrara 1, renovation replacement of VOAG shop building, design only, about $225,000. And the Mercer's underway with that one. That's Plan 1 is doing that particular Mercer study. Teton 1, replacement of the transportation facility. Again, that one's actually going to be under contract soon here. And so 17.5 million was allocated for that one. And then the capacity issue at Pine Bluffs Elementary. We're looking at, again, a Mercer for that one. Plan 1 is doing that particular project also for that. And so there's 4.9 million, and that's for the design and construction. And then, Mr. Chairman, 6%, if you take 6% of all those project costs that are there, as we do and on all of our construction design projects, roughly $5.7 million. So that 95 million we're anticipated right at this point in time is spoken for. Again, there's some Mercers going on underway on some of these, so that could change. But right now, we're that dollars are allocated. Part of it's under design, part of it's headed towards construction, and yet some Mercers to complete. So any questions the committee might have on that?
Any questions, committee? Okay, thank you, Director.
Turn it back to Ms. Carlson.
Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, provide the committee an update on the inflationary funds that were appropriated in 2023, total of $20,337,956. When the 2023 appropriation came through for inflationary funds, it was tied to specific projects. And so I show the legislation reference there. If you look like at the capital A through D, it kind of shows you the amount of money that was appropriated to certain projects that came through a certain portion of those bills or session law. As was mentioned earlier by Ms. Phillips, this past legislative session, the legislature did approve up to 13.4 million of those remaining funds to be used for projects that remain on the original list, but also some of these approved projects going forward rather than to revert back. So if you go to the next page, anything that's shown in green has already been bid out and let to contract. If you look at those, you'll see there's only 6 of those projects that ended up hitting the inflationary funds, and you'll see that use of funds there in the right column. If we look through the ones that are still shown in white, the Jackson Elementary Waste and Domestic Water Project in Fremont 25, that facility is wrapped up in the adequacy Mercer that is ongoing. And so that is just kind of on hold until we see what that Mercer is going to recommend.
Ms. Carlson, which one of the Fremont 25 projects was that?
The very top one there, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
The next one down in white, Albany 1, purchase of land for a future school. They've got $750,000 that could tap into these inflationary funds if needed. At the current time, Albany 1 is not looking for property or doesn't have plans, but that money is still sitting there and could tap the inflationary if it needed to. So the rest of the projects on that page have been bid out. You'll see there's just the construction of Little Powder and the Douglas HVAC replacement that did tap into the inflationary funds. If we go to the top of the next page, page 10 of 12, Riverton Rendezvous Elementary School sanitary waste, again, a component project that was set up for Rendezvous School in Riverton. That is the primary facility that drove the Mercer request. And so again, that's just waiting until we determine what that project looks like going forward. So it has component money attached to it and can tap these inflationary funds. The other two, down a little further, Converse One, Douglas Intermediate, again, that one's been put on hold. That is a facility that hit the condition list last year. And so it will have a Mercer done on it as soon as I can free up one of our consultants to move forward and do a Mercer on that intermediate facility. So again, we just holding on that component project. Doesn't make a lot of sense to go in and do an HVAC project depending on what that Mercer recommends. And then Uinta 1, Evanston High School VAV retrofit. This is a project that was down the list on the components, and so on the component list, it's still waiting to know if we're going to have enough component money left as those other projects finish up for us to move forward with that project. So it's just not in the queue at this point in time. So of the 20.3 million that was appropriated, 6.9 million has been expended, and we have 13,396,000 remaining. And with that, I would take any questions if there are.
Any questions, committee? So Ms. Carlson, real quickly, on the Fremont 25 sewer, water, that's an infrastructure piece. Having met with some of our small towns locally that are really struggling with that kind of infrastructure, is this sort of a look ahead to what we may expect in other districts? Are we finding infrastructure problems out there, or is this just isolated to Fremont 25?
Mr. Chairman, I think we are starting to see that occur in a number of older facilities. It's starting to show up in our FCA and our facility condition assessment. You'll see areas where there are concerns with plumbing and sanitary sewer, some of these long-term infrastructure systems that are in place on those older buildings. We do have a number of those facilities that we need to go in and do some further testing on, maybe some scoping of those systems to determine, what the actual condition is. So I think we are starting to see those types of issues occur in our older facilities. As an example, I think we may have visited last year about what was going on with the Sweetwater High School in Rock Springs with their sanitary sewer, and it was just kind of crumbling away on them, and they were repairing like crazy. So that new high school is coming just in time for them, but that sanitary sewer in very tough shape. See the same thing in Campbell County High School.
Okay, please proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item, I'll go ahead and try and handle, but I apologize for that. Get up and back and forth, and I may have to do that more than just this time because I've had a head cold for about a week now, and so I'm getting a tickle in my throat, and it doesn't seem to be going away this morning. So hopefully I won't have to turn my portion of the stuff over to the staff, but anyway, Mr. Chairman, next is I'd like to give you kind of a preview of the budget considerations for this next year. We met with our commission here earlier this month and kind of talked through some items as we move forward. And there's going to be a couple of new things, Mr. Chairman, that I think you haven't seen in the past that I want to try and talk about. I'm going to run down through the different, we kind of have it bulleted here on the bigger parts that you see in the budget historically as we go down through here. And I'll try and give you some of the dollar amounts that you saw in the previous biennium budget. But in the operations side, there's previously it was about 6.9 million. We expect that to probably increase some. We're going to be asking for a couple of new people for the department. So there'll be some increased costs for personnel. Additionally, we've got our travel budget is running low. And again, a lot of that I think is driven due to the Mercer studies that we're having. I think Shelby alluded to that a little bit earlier. Typically, we'd see a couple of Mercer studies a year. And so now we're seeing like 21 right now. We probably got another 10 or 15 to come forward. We have a lot of staff travel with that, going out and visiting with the districts and through that whole process, more than one drive out to those districts. So anyway, we'll probably see something there. The rest of that, I think, will be pretty much standard in the overall operations budget. I think we are up for some new computers this year, but not for the whole department, just for part of them. This charter school leases, $4.2 million previously. We have those same charter schools out there, but there could be some increase in that because they are adding some square footage, and it's based just like we do on the schools, the ADM calculations, those sort of things moving forward. The one that I mentioned a little bit earlier is the charter school contingency fund. That, Mr. Chairman, is something you haven't seen in the past. And Mr. Chairman, you're aware that, you know, when this charter school stuff first kicked off, charter school would be in operation for 3 years before we would start making lease payments. And so we had time to figure out how many students were there, when it's coming on. There was this time for us to then make the request to you all for a budget request, another 18 months out from when this process probably starts on that front end to get the money. That was recently changed a couple of years ago, so now effective immediately when a charter school comes on, we're responsible to fund their lease payments. And so there's a lot of moving things going on within this, within the biennium request to try and do that. So one of those is, for example, we can have a new charter school come on immediately and we have to fund it. We can't wait. Well, I guess we can tell them we can't fund them because we'd have to wait for an appropriation to do that. And so another thing that's changing with this kind of a dynamic process is we've got charter schools currently, say in Cheyenne, where they designed their charter school when they started to be a K-4, and then each year they're going to, next year they're going to go add a fifth grade, the next year a sixth grade into that. Well, that's affecting those dollars that come up, and we have to be able to react to that on a yearly basis. There's also the effect of the changes in the block grant funding and the operations and maintenance calculations on a yearly basis that we take back out of the lease payment. And so there can be changes on how that's flowing. And then another charter school that we have in Laramie 1, they actually have, when we do the calculation on the percentage of square foot, they have more students. Their student population would drive a bigger square footage than they currently have. So what they've been doing is adding some more square footage every year. And so when that comes on, then they're eligible for an additional payment because they qualify within those confines of the available square footage. So we've got a lot of moving parts through the year. And so one thing that we'd like to ask, and we've got later on in our presentation, we've got some stuff that I'd like to show you how we came up with this number. But we'll probably be looking at about $1.1 million for what we're going to term a contingency fund so that we can make payments as these projects change or come online. Right now, the charter school, and we'll hear more about that when we get into the charter school discussion, in Alpine, if it was to come online this year, we don't have any money to pay for it. So, and we don't know exactly when it's going to come online. At one point in time, the discussion was they were going to build a new school. Well, that'd give us time to plan. We'd have a finished date. Then there's the discussion they're going to buy the modulars that are coming out of Jackson from their new private school that's being built up there. So when I've been trying to follow this situation in Alpine, it's kind of a fluid dynamic as to when they may or may not open. And again, with the timeframes with us having to come before you, then go through the budget session, make that available the next year, I do think we need some funding, additional funding for these charter school contingency funds to try and address all of those changing movements. The next is modular leases. I don't see any changes in the dollars there. They're for Laramie 1, and there's about 52,000 is what we're paying for modular leases in Laramie 1 at this point in time. Engineering and technical, on the last budget, we asked for 1.2 million. We'll probably ask for some more. There was some conversation on, what are you doing? How are you trying to look at the efficiencies you're learning, safety and security. I discussed a little bit earlier. So those fall out of that engineering and technical process. And again, with the Mercer studies, again, there was originally, when we talked about the 95 million, there was 100 million put out in that block rather than the 95, but 5 million of that was allocated towards Mercer studies. We're doing a lot of Mercer studies now. We got a lot more Mercer studies coming for this, that should be going out on the street right now for this year. And we're headed into next year, and we are forecasting we're going to need some more there. So again, that's something that would fall under that engineering and technical that we could use some additional funding there once that 5 million tranche runs out of money. Design phase projects, and I won't go into the dollar amount. Some of these were discussed with your LSO staff early on for funding. But these are the projects that we're right now anticipating is Hobbs Elementary, a request for design and construction for that. Laramie East High School, an addition onto that high school. On the construction phase, again, Hobbs. And then we're not going to ask for construction money right at this point in time on East because there's a lot of what the Mercer's starting to drive out. We're fairly far along on that is there's a lot of different avenues you can take to add on to that building. So we want to go through the design phase, get a good cost from that, and then come back and ask for the money once we have a better costing, similar to what Representative Geringer asked about earlier. So safety and security funding, it's been since 2015 that there has been safety and security money provided directly for that component for schools. There was some changes where they could take up to 10% of their major maintenance for a time period. But again, we're seeing the need for that. Particularly, we'd like to focus on vestibules. We still have a number of schools around the state that don't have vestibules, and then bollards in front of them. So we've got a number of schools that have vestibules, but they got a pretty flat drive in there and there isn't bollards there. So we'd like to get some bollards so you can't just drive through the front door if the apparatus works right, that you can't get in through the vestibule, well, just drive through the front door. So we want to take a look at that. And then again, through this security summit that we held, there's an awful lot of things that the districts brought up to us. We're still analyzing and going through that, but our thought is there, and the conversation with the commission is that focus some of the money on these vestibules, but then break out the remaining funds based on ADM by school and let the schools then drive what they feel is the current safety needs that they need for those individual districts based on this dollar ask. Again, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I'm guessing it's probably, I'm thinking we're probably going to be in the $10 million range on that. As an ask. And then component level major maintenance funding, that's typically ran in the upper 20 to low $30 million a year. And so one of the things that came out of House Bill 86 this last year, we've used the term component projects for many years. And so for the new members on the committee, a component project is really an oversized major maintenance project. And so it may be a roof, it may be an HVAC, some of those things that are multi-million dollars in a lot of cases for the districts, and it really impacts our overall major maintenance funding. In some cases, they may not have enough major maintenance funding to even do one of those projects. So we look at trying to fund some of those larger requests for the districts. And in House Bill 86, it actually codified that for the first time, the term component projects, not only for schools, but for state buildings also. Moving on to the next page, demolition projects. So right now, we're anticipating asking for demolition money for ARP Elementary, and then for Campbell County High School, if we know. Some of you may have recalled from this past session when we talked about the demo for the high school in Campbell County. We asked for and received funding for the demo of the building, but we deliberately did not ask for that portion of the demo dealing with asbestos because we didn't know what that was. So as part of the design contract in the work on the new high school, that design contract has a portion that says you, the consultant, shall go out and do an asbestos review of that building and come up with the dollars for asbestos abatement for the demo, and then we'll come in and ask and add that in. Right at this point in time, again, we're down a ways for the actual construction of that building and having to demo it. So if we don't have that report from the consultant this year, we'll come back the following year, but right now we're showing it as a placeholder just in case that's there. Anticipated funds, again, that's 6% of the planning and design phases of the construction and the demolition of a project. So again, we'll ask for 6% of whatever these dollars may work out to be. And then major maintenance funding. This past biennium, it was about $176 million for major maintenance. With the changes that came out of the bills that were sponsored out of this committee last year, that has changed now from 2% to 2.5 as a factor. So that would be probably roughly in the $220 million range for major maintenance requests this year coming before the committee. And so if there's any questions, Mr. Chairman, I'm more than happy to try and stumble my way through those if I can speak anyway.
Thank you, Director. Nicely done. Committee, anything on any of the projects?
I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, that, so our plan is in the June meeting, which is towards the latter part of June for the commission, we're going to come with a much more, this is basically the sheets we presented to the commission this month. We're going to have a lot more of these dollars ironed out. I'd like to have it as close as we can. And then in July, it goes before the commission as far as their approval to move that forward to the select committee and to the governor's office. And so you'll see that in July. Timing with your next meeting is in August. So you'll have that formal budget request that's going to the governor and is forwarded from the commission to you all.
Okay, thank you very much, Director, for that. And Chairman, thank you. Also, anything for the good of the cause before we allow you guys to sit back?
Mr. Chair,
Senator, go ahead.
quick question for Director Comey.
Absolutely.
How much are we spending on Mercer studies again? You hit that pretty fast, and just wanted to get.
There was 5 million set out of that original 100 million that incorporated the 95 million that the table I talked about. So there's 5 million. We still have funding in that, and it really varies. You know, the largest one we have right now, and it was 400,000 for the Mercer study was for Laramie 1, but that was a 20-year strategic comprehensive review of all their elementary schools. So we have a Mercer study, and that's why Hobbs is coming up. That's why ARP and the 5-6 were in there. Over the next 11 years, you're going to see budgetary requests coming from that one Mercer study. And so you have some of these smaller ones that we talked about that might be for a transportation facility as far as just maintenance work on it or something like that, because of its rating if it hit a 0.3 on condition. And so let's go back to the Afton. It came, you know, that one was much, much less dollars than that. So they really vary in scale depending on the scope of the project.
Are we good, Senator? Okay. All right, let's go to public comment. Director, thank you. We're going to keep moving along because we're going to bring you right back up to help with charter schools a little bit later here, but I want to go to public comment on the item updates to our Department of School Facilities Commission. Public comment. Good morning. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen, Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I had initially wanted to address my comments during that first section, but given the discussion here today, I believe that this is probably the most appropriate place for my comments, which are more in the form of a question for the committee. I'm curious and a bit concerned that I have not seen anywhere within the agenda any discussion or addressing how the state is going to implement and define suitability, the suitability standard, nor plans to reduce the lag time in approving getting new facilities built. And I want to ask the committee, what is the plan moving forward to define and implement a suitability standard for our schools? With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, any questions for the WEA? Any questions? Okay, thank you. Further public comment? Any further public comment on our agency's information sharing for the morning? One final time, is there anybody online, Ashley, who wishes to comment?
Mr. Chairman, you will not have anybody online today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on. Senator Rothfuss.
Before we move on, do we want to put in a request perhaps to staff to start drafting that budget? We just got a preliminary outline. We could have staff work with Dell and put together the first bill for us to at least have in front of us. It obviously wouldn't be finalized probably until our third meeting, but I think it's good to get that started, that process started. So what are your thoughts on that? I'd be happy to make that motion if it's appropriate.
I don't think it would hurt to make that motion at all.
Chairman?
Senator Rothfuss, Senator Dockstader.
Mr. Chairman, before we make the motion, Senator Rothfuss and Mr. Chairman, with your directive, we should probably keep it a little more detailed as to what staff will bring back to us rather than a broad motion.
So Tanya, maybe I could go to you and help me out. I thought usually reserved our effort for August on that front and then taking up the budget at the end of October. But would it be helpful for us to give a little bit of directive on the beginning of drafting what we've gone over this morning? Help me.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think the State Construction Department is way ahead of schedule on getting the budget approved. And so by statute, it's September 1st that they make their recommendation. But my understanding is that it's going to be presented to the commission in July. And so after it's presented to the commission, one option would be to direct staff to prepare a budget that reflects what was adopted by the commission. And then you could certainly amend that in any way that you so chose, but it would give you a sort of jump start on looking at the projects and the numbers and kind of what that bill might look like. There's a rough outline in their meeting material today. There just are not numbers tied to it.
Yeah, appreciate that, Director. So Senator Rothfuss, there's the answer. That would provide us with a preliminary bill that we could get a look at in August. And I don't think that would harm anything. We wouldn't necessarily have to pass it in August. We
No.
Carry
we
that
wouldn't.
forward to October, but
Yeah.
if you'd like to.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make that motion, and to, Senator Dockstader's request, that it certainly, I should have provided that little additional flavor to it. Usually what we get brought to us as bill draft number one is exactly what the commission recommends. And so I should have clarified that that's the expectation. And then, sometimes we end up amending that. Sometimes we end up choosing the numbers, like this is how much we can afford. And so we're going to cut a few things out as the next action. But yeah, my intent is to effectively have the commission's recommendations put into bill draft form for us to see as a bill draft in our standard format of that bill draft for the select committee.
And Mr.
Does that
Chairman,
help, Senator? Matt?
just in part of the budgeting process, traditionally, the agency's operations, the commissions and the department's operations, and major maintenance and engineering and technical costs are contained in the budget bill under section 027, which is the agency for a state construction department. We've done it a couple different ways where we've shown that in agency 27 in the budget bill. And it really is the purview of the Joint Appropriations Committee to review that portion. But we're happy as part of the generally the recommendation from the committee includes all of those amounts for major maintenance and operations as kind of the first iteration of that review process. And then the construction projects and leases are contained in a separate piece of legislation, either through the budget bill, section 313, or a standalone budget bill, as was completed in this past session. So I don't know what direction you want on like the major maintenance costs. All that's kind of a formula. It's just one number in the budget bill. The agency operations is their recommendation.
So, Mr. Wilmar, thank you. So it almost could look like a correspondence from the committee regarding major maintenance, along with two drafted pieces of legislation, right?
Mr. Chairman, previously in the initial bill draft, recall there's a section 1 that is the agency 27 that Matt just mentioned, and then there's a section 2 with all the construction projects. In the final bill draft, section 1 historically has been deleted as the Joint Appropriation has taken that up. Recall, you'll make a recommendation to the Joint Appropriations Committee, but you have included in your previous bill drafts the major maintenance, the engineering, technical, and the operational costs, just as information to the Joint Appropriations Committee, and they basically can cut and paste that into the budget bill.
Thank you, Tanya. So, Senator Rothfuss, I'm thinking that's what your motion said, wasn't it?
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent summary of my motion.
And I thought I heard somebody second the motion, seconded by Representative Provenza. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, thank you, Tanya, for working closely with our agency to have that ready for August. That'll give us an early look, and I appreciate it from our agency folks. Okay, let's go to public comment, unless there's anything. Committee? Any further comment? Okay, Representative Provenza, did you have something?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make my motion after lunch.
Okay, all right. Anything? Okay, let's go to charter schools. Okay, and you'll notice that our target is 12:30 to break for lunch, committee, just so you have that on your radar screen. And we will do our best to get there.
Mr. Chairman, Tanya Heydrich.
Omar, thank you again for coming up.
Tanya Heydrich, Operations Administrator and Legal Counsel for the Education Committees, and I'll let Mr. Wilmarth introduce himself as well.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Wilmarth, LSO Senior School Finance Analyst.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, priority number 3 for your interim topics is charter schools. And in your meeting packet, there is a memo from Mr. Wilmarth and myself with an overview. You'll notice that it's not just an overview of the facility. It also contains information about the operations. It was our opinion that it may help the committee to have sort of a holistic view of the landscape of charter schools rather than just what's happening on the facility front. With that, Wyoming Statute 21-301 through 314 governs the operation, approval, and funding for charter schools. It was initially enacted in 1995 and substantially modified in the 2021 session, and then again in the 2023 session. I think it's important to note that charter schools are public schools within the school district in which they operate, regardless of whether it's authorized by the state authorizing board or by the school district. They are required to deliver the basket of goods. They're required to comply with the content and performance standards. and ensure that students participate in the statewide student assessment. Teachers employed by charter schools on a full-time basis are required to be licensed, just in the same manner as any other public school teacher. They're required to comply with the Professional Teaching Standard Board requirements, and they're subject to all state and federal laws and constitutional provisions prohibiting discrimination. The operation of a charter school can be approved now by two entities, the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board or school districts. There was a short time that the State Loans and Investment Board, the SLIB, was authorized to approve 3 charter schools. Those 3 charter schools approved by that entity, the oversight has now been transferred to the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. The Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board is comprised of 8 members, 3 appointed by the state superintendent, 3 appointed by the governor to be confirmed by the Senate, the chairman of the State Board of Education, and the dean of the University of Wyoming. Pursuant to modifications in the 2024 session, there is now no limit on the number of charter schools to be approved by the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. There's never been a limit on the number of charter schools that can be approved by the district. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wilmark to discuss funding, unless there are questions on the first portion of the memo.
Any questions on that overview by Tanya? Thank you for that, Tanya. Mr. Wilmark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm going to touch on just the funding piece for charter schools, primarily through the Education Resource Block Grant model, but also a little bit on major maintenance. Charter schools are funded as any other school within the K-12 funding model for the district in which they operate. There was an amendment really in 2023 that directed 100% of the school level resources generated through the Education Resource Block Grant model be entitled to the charter school. Charter schools are also entitled to reimbursements that are eligible for special education, transportation, isolation and maintenance payments, teacher extra compensation payments, and routine maintenance as well. This past session, there was a bill that was enacted into law, Chapter 25, that also further entitled school district or charter schools to a proportional amount of central office resources on the basis of their average daily membership compared to the total school district membership. And that'll take effect school year 2025-26. Prior to next year, school districts retained that portion of central office funding in their budgets. For the funding out of the Education Resource Block Grant model, while district or the charter schools are entitled to those funds, nothing prohibits the charter school and the district to have a mutually agreed upon budget in which the district and the charter school have shared services for central office and so forth. But the starting point is that the charter school is entitled to those amounts generated by the block grant. The other piece is, in the instance a charter school is not in a leased facility, it is entitled to 100% of the major maintenance amount that is allocated through the major maintenance model. And there's only one school in the state that has a district-owned building, that is in Albany County School District Number 1, Snowy Range Academy. The remaining, Fremont County School District Number 38, the Arapahoe Charter High School. Those are the only 2 in district-owned facilities. And the major maintenance amounts are entitled to those charter schools. The remaining charter schools are in leased facilities.
So Matt, real quickly, I'm assuming that teachers in our charter schools, given that these are authorized by a district or by the authorizing board, they would fall under state employment. Is that correct? In other words, be included in the and the retirement benefits and all those things that go with it?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. They participate in the state retirement system. And regarding health insurance, they have their own health insurance plans that they have chosen to participate in, whether that's through the district or their own independent plan. I believe they would also be eligible to participate in the state's health insurance plan if the district is a part of that as well.
So if they choose their own health plan, it's up to the district. Do they come to an agreement on that? Is that something that the district just has to live with? If it's, I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to the school districts that you're going to have present before you. I don't know those nuances between their agreements. So I will defer to the
Okay,
districts.
thank you. Any questions of Matt before he moves on? Okay, please proceed. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one final piece that I wanted to touch on in terms of funding is charter schools are unique in that they are funded in the first year of operation in the funding model, which is different than non-charter schools. The funding model primarily resources districts based upon prior school year data. Charter schools are unique in that the first year of operation, they weren't established in part of the district. And so the legislature has taken a policy position to utilize a October 1st enrollment count as the basis for funding in that first year of operation. And in fact, it's adjusted for the first 3 years based upon that enrollment count for the charter school. And then if the charter school does not open as a K-12 charter school and they expand grades, those expanded grades are funded for each year that they expand in the year that they expand by that enrollment count. And I think you've seen that across the charter school that opened recently here in Casper. They started off, I believe, as a K-5 or a K-6 elementary school, and they're going to anticipate adding 1 grade per year. And so that additional grade after the first 3 years will be adjusted in the first year by its enrollment count. That is different than how non-charter schools operate. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to Tanya for the charter school facilities piece.
Okay. Ms. Heydrich?
Mr. Chairman, this discussion begins on page 3 of our memo. The application for charter schools is required to contain a description of the facilities to be utilized, including any district-owned building. And in the event that the charter school is going to utilize space that's owned by the school district, they're not required to pay rent for that space. Any other costs associated with the improvement, modification, operation, or maintenance of the facility is subject to negotiation between those two entities. The state reimburses charter schools for lease costs if the charter school is leasing an educational facility, if it is approved to operate in Wyoming, and if the district agrees to pay the funds to the charter school. The amount to be reimbursed is the lesser of the total, or the total lease, or the average cost per square foot for comparable building space for the allowable square foot through the adequacy standards. They're required to separately identify major maintenance and account for those expenditures. And then on the bottom of page 3, we list those charter schools that have been approved. 3 were approved by the SLIB, which I previously mentioned. Those have been transferred to the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. The 4th charter school was approved in Alpine. I believe the State Construction Department spoke about that briefly. And then there are 5 district-approved charter schools, 2 in Laramie County School District number 1, 2 in Albany County School District, and then a final charter school approved in Fremont County School District number 38. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wilmark to speak about the funding for those schools.
Okay, any questions so far? Okay, Mr. Wilmark?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to wrap up the funding piece. So I touched on the amounts that charter schools are entitled to. And so Table 1 on page 4 illustrates by charter school and whether those are district authorized or state authorized charter schools, the amount of state funding that those charter schools will receive or are anticipated to receive for school year 2024-25. And that can be found in the column titled Estimated Total State Funding. So statewide, about $17.7 million will be entitled to charter schools this current school year that's wrapping up. About 1,200 students statewide are enrolled in charter schools. And I added a column on the far right to show a proxy of the additional amount that central office funding will be entitled to charter schools beginning next year. This isn't new money generated through the block grant model, but this is the amount that is retained by the districts under the current year as if the proportional amount would have been generated for the charter school. So as a proxy, you can anticipate about $1.4 million next school year will be entitled to charter schools for purposes of central office, non-personnel, and personnel expenditures. One other piece I included at the top of page 5 is the authorizer of charter schools are allowed to assess a fee not to exceed 3% for the authorizer's costs. The state, the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board, the state authorizer, in this school year, 2024-25, assessed a 0.5% administrative fee to each of the 3 state authorized charter schools. That's anticipated to generate approximately $37,500 to be returned from those charter schools to the state authorizer. It is not close to what the cost of that charter school authorizing board costs are. For the 2025-26 biennium, the estimated budget for the statewide authorizing board is approximately $711,000 or $711,403. That includes appropriations from the legislature for an additional position in the budget bill to the Department of Education, as well as a B11 from the governor's office to the for an additional employee. And so that administrative fee covers about 10% of the biennial budget for the first year that will be collected. And I'm not sure if that fee will be increased or assessed next school year. I'll leave that to the authorizing board to opine on. Finally, and I think we discussed this as part of the State Construction Department's budget, in the 2025-26 biennial budget, approximately $4.2 million was appropriated for charter school leases for the biennium. And an additional $1.9 million was appropriated as part of a repeal that required a charter school to operate successfully for 3 years prior to being eligible to receive a lease. And so that policy choice of removing that 3 year of operation costs approximately $1.9 million for those first 3 years of operation. With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation on charter schools.
Well done. Really appreciated that report, Tanya and Matt. Questions, committee? Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to resolve in my mind, we've got, in Laramie County, we've got the Poder Academy that has 2 locations that I believe were former schools in the district. And since sold to private entities and leased back to these charter schools, I'm trying to resolve in my own mind kind of the disconnect between they weren't adequate for school district use, and maybe that's based on condition, maybe it's based on the capacity. But but they seem to still work for a school environment. And so is it something that we should be considering as we're getting rid of a bunch of these schools and existing facilities? Is it something that we can do to leverage into additional options for our students? Is it, what can we do as a body to encourage that kind of thing? And is there something that I'm missing here? Why are we just getting rid of all these schools when they can still be utilized for education?
Tanya, do you want that one?
I thought you were going to respond, Mr. Chairman. Representative Geringer, you raise a good point. And there is certainly a disconnect in that regard. And what I would say in response is charter schools are public schools within the school district in which they operate. And they are entitled to adequate, safe, efficient school buildings, just the same as any other public school. And in fact, I believe the contract that's utilized now by the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board requires that any facility adhere to state regulations governing the operation of school facilities, which means the adequacy standards and the other rules from the state construction department. And to your point, I think that's exactly why this issue is before this committee for this interim, to consider the leasing and financial consequences associated with charter schools.
Matt?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative, I would also add, we'll touch on it later on this afternoon as the last item. The commission has to approve any disposition of any land or buildings by a school district. And so there is a stopgap in the instance that maybe this committee or the commission doesn't believe that removing a facility from a district's inventory is appropriate and could potentially be utilized for a future use. And so, that's certainly a policy call on how the state wants to wrestle with that conundrum.
So Senator Rothfuss?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. On that point, I think that is a concern that we've identified where we hear we need to close the school down, we need to replace it, it's not good enough for students. And then it gets closed down and then somehow for a charter school, it's good enough. And that's really not acceptable. And yet that's what's being done. And then we have other schools that have been closed for condition scores that haven't even been shut down by the district necessarily, and they're still being used as long, not just for short-term swing space, but still planned to be used moving forward. And it is something we've been seeing that is a real concern, because it can't be bad enough that we need a new school and also good enough that we can keep using it for something else. Unless we have another remedy. If you invested a lot of money into it, that would be one thing, but realistically, if it was worth investing a bunch of money into it to get it back to a good enough condition score, that should have been the most cost-effective remedy. So we've seen that over the years, and I'll just say we've been concerned about it as you are. You definitely identified something that's jumped out in not just this case, but in other cases around the state.
I think that's really well stated, Senator Rothfuss. And Representative Geringer, you really hit on one of the primary policy considerations I think that this committee has, and that is, now that we're putting the accelerator down on charter schools and throwing the door fairly much wide open, I think it's going to land on this dais quicker than we think. As Senator Rothfuss pointed out, we have facilities here in Natrona County that have been mothballed. Well, there's a reason why they're mothballed. So if we can go in and spend millions of dollars renovating those buildings, then maybe they shouldn't have been mothballed in the first place. But certainly, if we're going to authorize a charter school, those students deserve consideration. So as you sometimes hear, stand back. You don't know how big this is going to get. But Senator Smith, go
Quick
ahead.
question, Mr. Chair, just for Matt. On the numbers I think on page 4 of the memo that you gave us, so the total cost is approximately $17,659,000. Does that sound right? Did you say there were 1,200 students approximately in the charter schools? Is that what you said?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
Matt,
if
go
you look
ahead.
at the last row, the grand total in that ADM column, 1,213.693 ADM.
Okay, I didn't see that.
I didn't put Mr. Chairman, Senator, I didn't put a per ADM cost associated with that, but it's,
I don't speak acronyms, so I didn't know what ERBGM, ADM meant, but actually, so I just want to, like, if that's about right, though, then that would be about 14,700 per student is what we're spending on charter schools right now. I mean, if,
yeah, Mr. Chairman and
Matt, go
Senator
ahead.
Smith, I would caveat that you would likely want to add in that 1.4 million in the next column to your total, because that's the amount that is currently retained by the district for the central office piece.
Okay,
okay,
follow up, Senator?
I just want to state that number. So we got divided by 12, 13, just a second here. So $15,712 per student approximately, if my numbers are right, which I think they are, but just wanted to, I thought that was a good number to know for this committee. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. Further questions of Tanya or Matt? Representative Geringer.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up to the point Senator Smith was making. What is the cost per student in district schools, roughly? Do we know that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's a little over 18,000 per student. And the reason you're going to have fluctuations across the state, it's driven primarily by the size of the district. Smaller the district, the higher per cost, because there's minimum amounts built in for teachers or central office staff. And there's some diseconomies of scale. The smaller you are for student activities, the higher amount you get per student. Also, another driver is the regional cost adjustment. The costs up in Teton County are about 75% more on average for salaries than the statewide average. And so that drives part of the per pupil cost increases. And so, but statewide about a little over 18,000.
Yeah, good question, Representative Geringer. And I always try to caution utilizing that number simply because, you know, in Claremont, for example, you spend 35, 38, 39,000 per student. Here in Natrona County, you could maybe get away with spending 12 or 13. So,
Yeah,
Senator-
Mr. Chairman, just real quick on this, it's about 1.7 billion statewide, you have about 90,000, little under 90,000 students. So that's, and that 1.7 billion does not include major maintenance, which you could potentially say, well, that's part of operating a statewide.
yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Wilmarth. And Senator McEwen, you had something, and then we'll go to Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question on the funding for the charter schools. Does that include their equivalent leases or capital construction, or is that on top of it?
Mr. Wilmarth?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, does not include those costs. So the leases would be in addition to that amount. Any major maintenance would be in addition to that amount. So this is primarily just what I would consider operations funding. It does not consider the capital construction side of the budget.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith?
Mr. Chair, just to follow up on Matt, what you had mentioned on when you add in facilities. I'd asked LSO and I got the number of approximately 23,700 or so. Does that sound about right to you?
Mr. Wilmarth?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would, if you're looking, you're talking about a per pupil cost in the state of Wyoming
Right.
for students.
Total, all
I can certainly run those numbers. I would include the operations funding through the block grant model and any categorical grants, major maintenance, and then I would caveat including capital construction as those are one-time expenditures. In this current biennium, you've been well over 400, maybe closer to $500 million in capital construction. And if you try to compare those over biennia, or really those are a biennial cost, not an annual cost. So I can certainly provide those figures to the committee, but I would caution including capital construction in that per pupil cost, but I'm certainly happy to do it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilmore. Further questions? Good questions all the way around. Thank you both for a great report. Let's go to our agency folks. Director McComey and your fine folks with you. I hope you've had a chance to get one of those cough drops and maybe you're ready to go again here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tanya, you're a lifesaver. No pun intended with that, but yeah. So hopefully I can kind of muddle through this. I'm actually going to turn it over to Administrator Carlson to kind of address this topic and certainly
Thank you.
add in.
Thanks for taking this on and helping us to get our arms around charter schools. So take it away, Director. Oh, we're going to Ms. Carlson. Okay,
Mr.
here we
Chairman,
go.
Shelby Carlson, School Facilities Division Administrator. I'll cover this at a pretty high level. We are required by statute to pay leases. As you've heard, that changed a couple years ago, where now we don't have that 3-year lag, but we start immediately being responsible to reimburse that lease payment. Also in statute is we remove the cost of utilities and O&M because that money is coming to them through the block grant. So once we calculate that lease payment, then we remove the estimated cost that we get from WDE at that point. We have changed our processes. We used to just pay out in one lump sum payment. As we're starting to see a lot of these variables hit us, we have changed to go to quarterly payments, very similar to how we do major maintenance payments to the districts. And then as we get updated O&M costs from WDE based on the October enrollment, it allows us some flexibility then to try to correct up those initial estimates that we made based on the O&M cost. House Bill 94 actually eliminated.
Madam Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Carlson, could you just, because a lot of us are new, and so acronyms, we're not really familiar, and I'm searching and finding them, but could you just state what O&M is?
Mr. Chairman, or Representative, I apologize. That is
suggestion?
operations and maintenance. So it's utilities, operations, and maintenance costs. And that is paid through the block grant. So we don't want to double pay for that. So we remove it then from our costs. And so we did remove that, eliminated the cap on the number of charter schools. So we know that we'll be getting more applications, more charter schools coming online. I'd like to talk about a few of the variables then that are affecting us. The deeper we get into addressing leasing for charter schools, these are some of the things that cause us variance from when we make our budget request to what we then actually realize. Changes to the student population, you've heard where sometimes they'll increase a grade every year, so that increases their ADM. Sometimes these schools may not even do that, but they have a large increase just from one year to the next, larger than we would have anticipated. We see variations in the rental rates. We use rental rates for similar type of properties in those communities where they're located. If we don't actually have other state rental costs in that location, we will average between the two closest or use another one that's relatively close. So those vary on us from year to year. Adjustments in lease square footage, they may go out and increase the amount of square footage that they're leasing. Most of our charter schools that we're paying leases on are driven by the size of the charter school and not based on ADM. So most of them can add square footage, and then we pay for that because their ADM would drive a higher allowable square footage. And then that modifications to the utilities, operations, and maintenance funding levels. So for those variables, I would say they can go up and they can go down. This past year, when they trued up the operations and maintenance information for us from WDE, we actually had one charter school that went up about $50,000, which is significant. Most of them were more around $3,000 change or shift. Luckily, we had one district or one school that went down $50,000. So we were able to go ahead and still pay those charter schools appropriately. Now, so they'll see a difference in the funding that comes from us. Ultimately, they're still getting the same amount of money. It's just whether they're getting it from us through the lease payment or they're getting it through WDE in their operations and maintenance payment. So I think for those reasons is why we have that request out there for consideration by the legislature for charter school contingency fund that will allow us to adjust and flex to those types of changes that happen quickly, and certainly we can't always anticipate in our budget request. A couple of items I'd also like to mention that we are going to look at policy changes on. We have historically always just used enrollment figures. We do get those ADM figures from WDE, so we're going to start adjusting that lease payment based on ADM figures as opposed to enrollment figures that we receive from WDE. The other item that we're looking at with the commission is adopting some emergency rules to amend Chapter 3. Section 11 requires that we look at a charter school, say for an elementary school, based on 67 square foot per student at an 85% utilization rate. When we look at a district elementary school, we have varying square foots, so we would look at a kindergarten's 50 square foot per student. Once we get in the first grade and second, third there, we're looking at 40 square foot per student. And in an elementary school, students are in a homeroom. They have that homeroom. We use 100% utilization rate. So we were just trying to align up how we're doing those calculations the same as we do them with a district public school.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think describing what a utilization rate means would be helpful for members.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Chairman. So if we look at elementary school, we use 100% utilization because those students are in a classroom, they have a home classroom. Those classrooms are full basically 100% of the day. Those students aren't moving in and out. When we get to the high school and middle school level, you've got students that they change classes, that sometimes you'll have empty classrooms, just depending on how those schedules are set up, and those students don't necessarily have a home classroom. So we use an 85% utilization rate of that facility just to accommodate how those students move and how that building is utilized throughout the day because of the different type of schedules that you see in middle school and high school versus in elementary school.
Okay, thank you for that.
You bet. And then the other change that we are looking to putting in is we as an agency don't have the authority to go and really determine the adequacy of a private facility. As an example, if we look at the facility condition assessment that we performed in 2023, we assess all of those educational buildings and the non-educational that are owned by the districts. We do not, we did not in general assess leased facilities that a school might utilize. The state doesn't own those facilities. There's an extreme amount of cost tied up with us going in and doing a full assessment of a facility, determine the condition of the HVAC system and the lighting and the condition of plumbing and some of those sort of things. And is privately owned. So they may or may not make any changes anyway based on what we would learn. So we do not assess private facilities. If they want to go into a district-owned facility, obviously, we've got those buildings assessed, and we will always go in at the request of a charter school to go in and assess whether it is adequate for their use. So that kind of concludes the points I wanted to make. If you flip over to page 4 of 4, you will see a breakdown of the lease payments for the 24-25 and 25-26 year for the different schools that are in leased facilities. And so you'll see what those costs are. When Director McComey talked about the charter school contingency fund, our proposal is about $1.15 million. And that is looking at the average cost of the charter schools we have and multiplying it by 2, saying maybe we'll get 2 new ones. We don't really know. That's just was going to be our estimate and our ask for a contingency fund if it's considered. And with that, I'd take any questions.
Mr. Chair.
Director, go
And
ahead.
in that request for that contingency fund, what we'd be looking at there is that not to expire, so that to stay there. So we'd have this first trough of money, and then depending on over the year or years, using that money, then we'd come back in the future to try and true that back up at some point. But, it may last 2 years. We could have 2 charter schools come on immediately and we use it in one fell swoop. But it might last for 3 or 4 years. We just don't know at this point in time.
So, Director, I've got a question. Maybe this is for Ms. Carlson. We've been paying these leases for quite a while on a couple of these facilities, and every year, of course, it goes up. I just wonder if, as we enter this charter world in a bigger way, if it wouldn't behoove a committee like this and an agency like yours to find out what it would cost to buy the building back. Representative Gerrans is right. We got rid of it, then it's sold to somebody private. Now we're paying somebody private to open that building again and keep it running. So it just feels like we're spending an awful lot of money on these leases. Have you ever thought about that? I mean,
Mr. Chairman, we actually have done that in the past. There was a discussion in Laramie, Wyoming, not Laramie 1, but Laramie, Wyoming, with their couple of their charter schools years ago, where we were asked to go back and look at that. Would it be cheaper to just repurchase that building rather than to continue to pay those leases? So we have looked at that in the past. To the earlier conversation and some of the questions that went on with your LSO staff, one of the things that we're seeing with schools, that a lot of that discussion was focused on, is it a condition issue with the school or is it a capacity issue with the school? What we're seeing for a lot of these buildings, say here in Natrona County, the district did not abandon those and we didn't take them offline due to a condition issue. It was due to a capacity issue. The capacity within the district has changed, and so I believe there's like 6 schools that they mothballed part of them for a time. Some of them they took off immediately. And it's just because there was no kids in the schools. And so those schools were adequate, and they're available at that point in time when they take them off. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we've actually tossed around internal to our staff and discussion with the commission is, as Mr. Wilmarth mentioned, as part of the commission's duty is to look and see before a building is disposed of, is it in the best financial interest of the state to keep that building? So the question becomes, how long do we keep a building? We don't know when a charter school is going to open up. Now, there has been this recent change where more can open up more quickly, but do we keep a building or do we keep 2 buildings here? And meanwhile, we're spending utility bills and all those sort of things. We're spending up to 10% of your major maintenance funds on that building. All of those sort of things that are a financial cost to the state and certainly a financial cost to the district on shall they come or not, as far as a charter school show up in an area. We didn't have any good thought on whether we could do that or not.
yeah, good thoughts, Director. I appreciate it. There probably isn't an answer today, but just thinking out loud with you. Committee, Representative Brown, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have just a real brief question about when you close or mothball a school, how do you maintain it? Do you just have to keep the heat to a certain level? Is there certain thing I know, if we shut down one of our ranch buildings, what we do with the plumbing and all that? Yeah, tell me about that.
You want to take that or you want me to? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really the district's responsibility. For the most part, I think they keep them heated, the water's on. I don't believe, I haven't been told anyway. There are some district facility managers here in the room, by the way, that could probably do a better discussion on that, but.
There are?
But basically, they're a functioning school up to that point. I mean, they're trying to keep them running. And so from a major maintenance standpoint, when a charter school, first they have to come and ask the commission to be able to mothball. And you can mothball a school for up to 3 years, and then you can come back for a second request after that and ask for an additional 3 years, while the district is trying to figure out what they may or may not do with a school. So at that point, they're trying to keep that thing running. It generates 10% major maintenance, so not 100% for the square foot, but they can use any amount of major maintenance to bring it back online. So not just the 10% that building would generate. So if it took $1 million to bring a school back online when they finally decide to reuse it, they can take that out of their major maintenance funds and apply to that where, and I'm just going to throw out a number, maybe it was only generating $100,000 in major maintenance for that building while it was mothballed. So it is a cost to the state from a major maintenance standpoint to mothball them, and then of course when you bring them back up online.
Does that help, Representative? Okay. Further question? Thank you both. Appreciate it. We reserve the right to ask a question of you a little later.
Thank you.
We've got several here, including the chairman of our authorizing board. I want to give Chairman Teske the opportunity to come up. Any colleagues, friends, associates, charter interested folks? Good to see you, Janine.
Good to see you, Mr. Chair. Thanks. I'm Janine Teske, and I am the chair of the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. And with me today are two board members, Fred Van Ayers and Joe Filer. Joe was selected by the state superintendent, and Fred serves on the state board. I'll be brief. There were questions that we were asked from LSO, and I think you all received a memo in that regard. And how do we as a board evaluate facilities for potential and existing charter schools? Well, as part of the application process, they are required to be able to ensure us that they meet all of the safety, any of the requirements that there's a paragraph down there, comply with all state and federal laws, rules concerning student welfare, safety, health, and so on. So the interesting thing, though, is I'll just say, to piggyback on some of what Matt said to you, is this charter school process is not for the faint of heart. As I reflect on what has happened with the Alpine School, which is the first school that we as a board approved, I'll bet you right now they've got probably $500,000 into it, and they won't see any return on that $500,000 until they see students in seats to start getting the ADM. So one of the things that has happened as a result of our board being established is, as it was mentioned by Tanya and Matt, the first 3 schools were approved by the SLIB board. The contract, so the process is, they develop an application, they apply, the application gets approved. Once the application is approved, then there's a contract that's developed between the authorizer and that school. I would say the first 3 schools, the contract was relatively weak in terms of the facilities piece of it. And so as we put move forward with the approval of the Alpine School, we actually put special wording into the contract that requires them to come to our board for consent of any change of location, building, whatever, that happens after the contract is approved. The first three schools do not have that. We have very little control over what's happening on those buildings. The other interesting fact is, all four of these charter schools have 501c3 corporations. And what happens is those corporations are the ones that develop the relationship between the school and the developer for any facilities. So that corporation then leases the building back to the school. And the question was asked about what about the impact of these finances? That is all part of our investigation as we go through to approve an application, because first and foremost, we want to make sure that the children are safe, they're going to be well-educated, it's going to be a high-quality school, and it's financially viable. And so all of those pieces come to play as we approve an application. So what happens if an applicant comes forward and the proposal that they're making in terms of their facilities does not meet our standards? There's kind of three things that can happen. Number one, we just outright deny the application. Number two is we ask them to put together a plan which brings the school into compliance with what we believe to be adequate. Or number three, we make an amendment to the contract and they find a new facility and work from the new facility. The facility, all in all, the facility does play a real important part. And, as we've been struggling with Alpine, it's been interesting to watch because Alpine, unfortunately, is sort of burdened with the same issue that Teton County School District is, which is there's not a lot of land to be had to be able to put schools on. And they've been wrestling with it. I think we have a solution. They have, I think it was mentioned earlier by Director McComey, that they have purchased some modulars that were retired from the Classical Academy in Jackson. And they will be moving those. If you want to show, you could probably, if you want to come down and watch it, they're going to be moving those modulars through the canyon the end of the end of June. And I would suggest that might be a little bit.
No, that might be a good place to stay away from. Thanks for the invite, though.
What's the specific date of that?
Committee, I don't think we want to go over there. There will be a parade in Alpine, though, with lots of ticker tape and, yeah.
But like I said, and and I appreciate what the department is trying to do, because Alpine actually, their 501c3 has actually gone to the bank and taken out a loan to purchase these modulars. And so, there needs to be some process that allows for some upfront recognition of the need, these schools have in order to be able to have a facility. So if I can just digress for just a second, I'll take you through, so where are we going? You all lifted the cap this past legislative session. So we are in the process of working on trying to project what that really means. So there's a couple of different kinds of growth. One kind of growth is, and it was mentioned earlier, whereby a school just continues to add one grade every year. And I think most of our schools will be seeing that happening. The school in Chugwater, Prairie View, they are already a K-12 school. Their growth, which is interesting to me, a lot of their growth has happened as a result of capturing students that left the K-12 system, parents homeschooled them, and they're now looking at Prairie View as a good alternative to what was there before. So that's another place of growth. Then the third place would be new charters applications coming forward. And we don't really know what that means. I suspect there's a bit of pent-up demand because I know particularly up in the northeast corner of the state, I've heard rumblings that there's a couple of schools that will apply. So that's in summary, and I don't know, Fred and Joe, if you have anything to add?
Well, Madam Chairman, thank you. Are there any questions for the chairman? And Ms. Teske, as you all know, has been involved for a long time in education, and really appreciate that you're willing to serve as our chairman of this authorizing board. So thank you, Janine. Gentlemen, appreciate you both being here. Please offer any comments that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Introduce yourself for the
Fred
record, if
Von
you would.
and I was proud to be on the RIDE committee and then the State Board of Education, and now also on the Charter Authorization Board. Just want to, and make sure I'm correct, but we have also assessed the fact that the 3 charter schools that exist, we can amend their facilities plan as we update their renewal, their 5-year renewal. So we will be doing everything we can to build those learnings into future contracts. I just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you very much. Good
Chairman,
morning.
and yes, I spent 35 years as a career tech ed teacher in this district, and then recently retired, but not done working. So it's been a pleasure to serve on this charter school board, and it's been an eye-opener. I think, I believe, the question is, the horse and the cart, which one comes first? And if you start to look at developing a charter school, you certainly want a good facility for your students. That's certainly our interest too, but where does that process start? I mean, it's a long process. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but when we heard the application for a charter school in Cody, that involved almost 600 students that were currently being homeschooled, and they were looking at, again, a little bit different model of a charter school than what we conventionally think of a school. And so they weren't looking at a big facility. But as Chairman Teske mentioned, we just don't know where this is going to go, and really how many students it's out there are involved. So it's a complex issue, but I know that everybody in this room wants good facilities for our students in Wyoming, and it's a tough one to find out how to fund that, especially when there's a lot of unknowns out there. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, appreciate that very much. Thanks for those comments. We're in good hands with that authorizing board, I think, committee, I can say that. We have good representation here today so thank you for all your work. Senator Dockstader.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd allow me to comment so much as I have a question, commend this group. Governor and everyone reaches out for successful people. They take successful people and move them into challenging situations, and that's what we did with this group. They've already been successful in their careers and their lives, and we had them pioneer an effort with charter schools, and I commend them for this work, not speaking about my school over on the west side of the state, but the big picture. You're taking care of the big picture, and you're venturing forward and using your experience to pioneer a great effort in Wyoming, so thank you.
So, Madam Chairman, there are unknowns as we forge into the forest here and see where it's gonna end up, and facilities is just a part of it, isn't it?
There are indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I say, as we keep going through this Alpine story, it's just like the little engine that could. You just, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. We're going to get the school up and running in 2026.
Yeah, appreciate that.
One more comment,
Please,
Mr. Chair.
absolutely.
We're absolutely committed to the success of these schools and supporting these schools. And quite frankly, it's exciting to see them grow. However, we're not just rubber stamping, and we are currently just working under the chair's direction on application process to really help schools, the folks that are interested in creating a charter, really understand what it's going to take to do it, so that when they get down that road, then there's a high chance of success. And we're quite frankly strained for resource as this opens up to make sure that we can support the application process.
Yeah, very good point. Committee, anything else for authorization?
The other really key thing is, the deeper we get into it, the more we find some of the little nuances of state statute. And what I'm referring to is places where funding doesn't flow because it only calls out, and isolation payments is a great example. Charter school students are not eligible because statute calls out district. And so we're working with the JEC to clean up those places within statute so that all students are on a level playing field.
I think, that's part of the operational things that you lay awake and think about it at night. I think about from a facility standpoint, Madam Chairman, you have all of these students who want a different experience, like a charter school can provide, but they still want to be part of the socialization of a public school. So what does that mean in our ability to take care of gymnasiums and football stadiums and, band facilities, for example? I don't know that we've really even touched that as much as it needs to be taken into account. So there's work ahead, it feels like to me.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Fortunately, we're at the place now where Prairie View is a K-12 school, but the rest of them have got a few years before we have to start really getting into that. But you're absolutely correct. It's something we need to start planning ahead for.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all three of you. We have other folks to get to before lunchtime. So Mr. Farmer is here. We have four chairs up. Mr. Green, Mr. Wilkinson, Jed, you two, anyone who'd like to come forward, and we're glad to hear from all of you on this charter school front. It's very informative, and we appreciate you all being here. So, Mr. Farmer, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. Mr. Chairman, here to speak with you about district-authorized charters. Prior to that, just a couple of comments on some of the discussions that you've had so far, because it's perhaps relevant to think about. In the dispositions of school buildings, when districts are taking schools offline, oftentimes those older buildings, clearly built before 1991, so prior to the ADA, facilities are not always something that are going to be accessible. And so thinking about those facilities and future school use, the necessity to adapt that facility so that it is open to all students, that those students have access to that facility. It's an important consideration. Also thinking about the growth and the size of facilities. Many of these facilities that are going offline are built from a different era. It's a neighborhood school, which is maybe a 2-section or even a 1-section school. 1 section means you have 1 kindergarten, 1 first grade, 1 second grade, and so on. So the capacity of that school is going to be somewhere in the ballpark of 125 to 150 students for that 1-section school. And you've seen some of the numbers of these charter schools. And so that kind of building, that 1-section elementary neighborhood school, may not be something that is adequate for a charter facility that's anticipating growth and adding additional students over time. And so thinking about that, and then also thinking about cost and cost of facilities. A lot of the reason that we're taking these 1-section schools offline is because it is more cost effective to run a school that has 300 kids or perhaps 500 kids than one that has 100 kids. And so if we can have that efficiency of a larger facility, oftentimes that has driven a decision to take facility offline and why that facility is no longer being used by a district. So in addition to considerations about suitability or adequacy. There are certainly considerations about how does the facility fit the need of the school and the students of the school. And going back just for a moment to that issue of access, talking about access, one of the other things that we should be careful when comparing the cost of education in the charter schools versus the traditional brick and mortar schools. You've already talked about the wide variations of cost, but to use very, very rough numbers, $1.7 billion for educating 90,000 students. Is sort of the number that's out there. That's roughly 20,000 a student. Of that 1.7, roughly 300 million is for special education and special education reimbursement. And right now, we're not seeing the same percentage of students that are special education within those charter schools that we're seeing within the traditional public schools. So that's 1.4 of the 1.7 is a closer comparison cost. And that 1.4 billion, of that, about 108 million is transportation-related cost. And so transportation and special education are two types of costs that we don't always see an apple-to-apple comparison between the charter school and the traditional public school. And so we have to think about sort of those nuances. And I guess that takes me to where I want to start. And that is that every charter school has its own unique story. Of the current 5 that are authorized in the state by districts, there are 2 in Albany County, 2 in Laramie County, 1 in Fremont County. Each of them has a very interesting history to it. Each of them have a very interesting history of how they came about, who they were to serve, and then how they have grown and changed and developed over time. And I think to tell that story, it's also important to know that there was one additional charter school that was a district-authorized charter school in Fremont County that is no longer operational today. And so Fremont County School District number 21 also had a charter school, but the thing is that Fremont 21 was a lot like what Fremont 38 is today. Fremont 21 is Fort Washakie School. And so that's, of course, on the Wind River Indian Reservation, primarily serving Native students. It was a K-8 district, and when the state was able to build a facility that served through 12th grade, the district said, yeah, we want to do that. We want to serve kids all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. And as that K-12 facility comes online, then the charter school goes away in Fremont 21 because it's not necessarily a need within that district any longer. And so some of the facility for the charter is then assumed by the new operational K-12 district. And so you have these stories of how did a facility come about? So a gymnasium that was created for the charter facility in Fremont 21 is now part of the district facility and ironically considered an enhancement for that district today. So these charter schools and their history and their connections to present day, it's not a linear discussion. It's not something where we can say, oh, this was planned out and it happened. These are things that evolve over time to meet the needs of certain communities. So, Mr. Chairman, Legislative Service Office asked districts to talk about their charters and asked 4 questions. How does the district evaluate facilities for potential and existing charter schools? What does the district do, or what would the district do if a charter school facility is not adequate? What are the budget implications of leasing a private facility versus leasing a school district facility versus owning a facility? And does the district take that into account? And what role does a proposed facility play in the district's decision whether to approve a charter school application? Mr. Chairman, I'll speak to Fremont County School District number 38. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be here today. Today is their last day of school. And so Fremont County School District 38 is Arapahoe. Arapahoe is a K-8 school district. And they were in a relationship, or continue to be in a relationship, with Fremont 25, which is Riverton. So the idea is K-8, you go to school in your home community, and then high school, you'll go on to a community about 12 to 15 miles away. And so as they were thinking about this, they noticed we have a segment of our students who don't complete school. They leave school, and we want them to come back, and we want them to be completers. So we're talking about a 17, 18, maybe even 19, 20-year-old kid who is still eligible for educational services, but we want them to come back and graduate. And so they created a charter school within their district to serve those students, to bring them back, to get them their high school diploma. And they also hope to offer them career and technical education to move them then into the job force. So this charter school was created around the notion of serving a specific population, but to not just get them to finish school, but move them into a job market. So that CTE focus, that career technical education focus of the high school, is an important piece of its facility need. So about 2005, the school is created and a separate building is built. So you have the K-12 facility and you have a separate building built for the high school facility. It really operates more like an alternative school, but a district that does not have a high school cannot have an alternative high school. So they have a charter school. By the way, they would like to build a K-12 building. I know they're talking with the commission, would like to do the same thing that Fremont 21 did, build a building. They would like to keep the facility they have, the charter facility that they have, to really focus on that CTE need. Over time, the use of that has been different. About 3 years ago, there were only 17 kids that were enrolled in that program. And so they had some changes within the staffing at the district, and a real focus on getting back to their mission. Who are they going to serve? And so they have increased today where they have over 50 kids in that program and have had a waiting list as high as an additional 30-some kids that would like to get into that. So a lot of this is staying in a home community, wanting to be able to go to school there, wanting to get some job skill so that when they graduate, they have entry into the workforce. And the facility is not built with your traditional wood shops or welding shops or things like that. So the district really does the best they can with the facility they have, because there's just not facilities on the Wind River Reservation that you're going to go and lease. You're not going to go find some other facility to use. So this facility was built, created for them to use. As there has been an ebb and flow of students, the facility has been used differently, but today demand is at its highest. And so they're bursting at the seams, wanting to create the comprehensive K-12 system, but still keep the facility that they have. Mr. Chairman, just recently, the district has purchased modulars to come in to help alleviate some of that need, to help alleviate that burden, because today they have 3 to 4 teachers sharing classrooms. And so to allow teachers to have their own rooms for students to have math or science or whatever in a particular room instead of sharing spaces. Mr. Chairman, they've also used their own district resources to build a track and a field. So that they have that facility within their school district. And they are a one-off. They are not like many other, because as a district that serves primarily Native students, they receive federal impact aid. So those federal dollars that come into the district are quite different from what so many of our districts get. So the reservation schools will get those federal impact aid dollars designed to go to the tribes and our Native children and find ways to address their educational needs. And so Fremont 38 didn't go our traditional route of going through the School Facilities Commission and saying, hey, we need additional classrooms. They didn't go the traditional route of saying, hey, we need need a track and a field. They looked within for their own solution and elected to use impact aid dollars to build the things that they want and need now for the students that they have. This is keeping those kids within their same community instead of busing them that 12 to 15 miles on to Riverton for school, trying to allow siblings to stay together in school, but they simply don't have the facility. So their long-term plan in Fremont 38 is to seek a K-12 school, which will be additional facility need, which they will present through the traditional process and request come before you at some point. But they still want to hold on to that charter school because they want the charter school to go back to its mission of serving that population of students who maybe were falling through the cracks, bring them back, give them not just the completion of their education, but the job skill to go on and be successful in the next phase of life. And Mr. Chairman, I asked him, I said, so what kind of CTE are you doing right now? You don't have an auto shop, which you would like to have. You don't have a welding facility, which perhaps is something you would like to add. And they said, our focus has primarily been around entrepreneurship. So we're looking at business and helping people to be entrepreneurs so that they can serve then their community on the reservation in Fremont County and in Wyoming. So it's a unique story. I don't think Fremont 38 is terribly like our other district authorized charters, but it's still telling the story of a district that came into a relationship. And I think Ms. Teskey described this super well. The charter is really the contract. A charter is a contract between an authorizer and a school. So you have two corporate entities. You have the school district as a corporate entity, and you have the corporate entity of the charter of the school. And they have a contract agreement, and that contract agreement guides so much of these questions that you'll hear answers from Laramie 1 and Albany 1 relating to things like facilities, relating to things like transportation. Previously, there was a question about health insurance. Typically, under the contract, that's going to be an independent obligation of the corporate entity of the charter school. Could they conceivably jump on with the district and the district's health? They could through that contract agreement. But at the end of the day, each one of them is going to have a slightly unique story. So to pass off to more of a traditional story, I'd go on to our real experts here. And hopefully I did a fair job of telling the story of Fremont 38.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Any questions so far? Okay, we're crowding the lunch hour, so I want to keep moving along. Mr. Cicerelli, good to see you. Do you want to just go right down the line here, or you guys handle it the way you want to handle it? How about that?
Mr. Chairman, certainly Jed Ciccarelli, Chief Financial Officer for Laramie County School District 1. In the interest of brevity, I'll spare you from listening to me read from the memo responsive to your requests on the questions, and maybe focus on some of the questions that were asked by the committee earlier and pick up on any other questions that the committee may have. But I'll start to maybe address Representative Geringer's first question with regards to Laramie County School District 1 and our facilities that had been previously owned by the school district and then now are operated as charter schools. The most recent building that I guess transfer took place on was Triumph High School, or our alternative school in Laramie County School District 1. When the new school was built, the district divested that building, disposed of it to a local developer. As I understand it, the intention was to turn that into apartments or something to that effect. Ultimately, it pivoted to a lease to the charter schools. And in order for it to be adequate for public education, it did require significant investment by that leaseholder on the front end, which leads to really kind of what is a little bit of a unique situation for the charter schools if you look at it from a district perspective, which is the build lease agreements that school districts typically aren't a party to, but the charter schools are. And what that is where the financing for construction or major renovations is funded through that leaseholder, and then in turn, kind of baked into the lease fees for that charter school. And if you look at it maybe from two different perspectives, there's some distinct advantages and disadvantages. From a charter school lens, they might not have the resources, the upfront capital to invest in a major renovation or acquiring a facility, and that's one of the few tools that they would have available to them. But if you take a little bit of a step back, typically, at least in our district early on, those agreements, those enhancements, expansions, remodels had been done somewhat outside the purview of the school district or school facilities. And at the end of that term, it might not represent an asset, a public asset, because that it would likely not be retained by that charter school that's leasing that building at the end of that term of that lease. And Mr. Chairman, you might recall a few years ago, specific to one of our charter schools, we had provided information to the committee where the charter school had a bargain purchase agreement built into their lease that allowed them to take ownership of the building at the end of the first term of the lease for $1. They opted, against our urging, to not execute that bargain purchase agreement from a kind of a perspective of they wouldn't have access to any additional funds for future expansion and renovation and remodel. We did look at it kind of from a fiscal aspect at that time that had the ownership transferred to the charter school, major maintenance would likely have kicked in. It still would have been a net savings to the state of $200,000 or more a year. And so those are some of the unique situations that are going to be different from each charter school that we work through and navigate with. And Mr. Chairman, just a couple of other ones to address quickly that might require some additional policy consideration, actually stemming out of some recent conversations that we've had with our charter school, is the question over, can a charter school, an existing charter school, open additional satellite locations, if you will, under the same charter. It's been kind of unclear, a little bit ambiguous on what their ability to open those additional locations under the same charters might be. And our concern was that this would potentially create inequities or barriers for other charter schools that might be seeking approval if there are no restrictions or if that was the intent of some of those arrangements. So that's certainly one additional point to consider. And Mr. Chairman, just to maybe build on Mr. Farmer's response to the health insurance question, as Mr. Wilmarth kind of explained earlier, the resources that are generated through our funding model for health insurance are flowed through to the charter schools, which provides those resources, as Mr. Farmer explained, for them to acquire their own health insurance programs for their school and manage those independently of the school district. And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to address any questions, and Mr. Knapp might have some follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Cicerelli. Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cicerelli, what might be an example of an inequity if you had a satellite location?
Mr. Chairman, where another charter school that may be seeking approval through the local school board to have an opportunity, if there would be that same opportunity for them to open a charter school under a new approval from the school district, if there are already additional sites from the same current charter that's approved from the school district was the initial concern. And of course, certainly, Mr. Chairman, if there are additional facility-related costs, that might be a part of that.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr.? Okay, please continue.
Mr. Chairman, Andy Knapp, Executive Director, Support Operations, Laramie County 1. I don't want to belabor the same issues, so I will touch a couple things. You mentioned earlier about mothballing schools. When that major maintenance is reduced to 10% on a school, to mothball it, if it's not in your future facility plan, that is a burden on the district with the maintenance of that school, both internally and externally with maintenance on landscaping, snow removal. We generally have a staff member that'll walk a building twice if it's shut down for any reason, twice a day. So not having full-time staff in the building, someone has to show up there every morning and night to check that building to make sure there's not something wrong with it. And I'll just move on to Senator Rothfuss's question about schools coming offline, whether or not they're adequate when they're going to come off for a condition reason. Our current schools that are coming off were flagged for condition, but I think something also to keep in mind, So they were flagged for condition, meaning either replacement or major renovation. And those schools, today's design guidelines, if we were going to replace one of those schools or you were going to do something with it, we would not replace those schools in the same site. So we have 7 or 8 schools that are on, the simplest ones on a plot of land that's anywhere from about 2 acres to 4.5 acres. The minimum design guidelines today are, I believe, on an elementary school are 4.5 acres plus an acre for every 100 students. So to put them back, to even replace them, they would not be replaced in the same location they are in condition, so.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. That burden piece is interesting because you've got windows that have to be replaced every now and then, I'm sure, and just, when you've got a mothballed building, it's not like it just sits all by itself. It has to be looked after, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Good afternoon. We're in the afternoon now, so.
All right, Mr. Chair, Randy Wilkson, Chief Operations Officer, Albany County School District. I'm gonna just add a couple of things, being the one school that we do own the building that our charter school is in. We learn something new every day in this situation, and it takes, I believe, when the district owns the building, a little bit of the autonomy away from the school, because I have to look at what the building requires overall, which may not be as important to that charter school, because that classroom inside is more important than that parking lot as that roof. And then the other concerns we've always had that we have not ran into at this time, we have a very good working relationship with them. But let's say they need a roof replacement. They get $254,000 a year in major maintenance money, and a roof for that is estimated at $1.2 million. So when that $1.2 million comes up, do I pull that from the rest of our district, or does that become a component project? So that's just one of the things we've always thought about of being a district-owned charter. Talking about other buildings, Senator Rothfuss was part of looking at one of our charter schools that was leasing a building, going into another one of our buildings that was 70 years old at the time, and looking at that suitability. Did that work? And we all decided at the time it did not. But the other thing you run into, if you have a school that is a 250 capacity and you only have 75 students, you still have to heat that whole building. You still have to do all those things. So trying to look at that suitability based on the size is also something you really need to consider as we look at that in a district supplied building.
Yeah, very, very well stated. Any questions for Albany? Let's keep going, by golly. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. Tristan Green, Chief Financial Officer for Albany 1. I don't think I need to reiterate anything that the great team has said. I will just provide a response to the insurance question that we do run the health insurance plans for the entire district, which our 2 charters choose to participate in. And so we go through taking those out to bid, looking at our different plans and things like that. We determine our splits for our staff. We let them know what insurance plans we have chosen and what the cost of those will be, and then they determine their splits. They write us a check once a month, to which we then pay their premiums for them. They do have the option to not participate in our insurance plan if they don't want to, but I think they appreciate us taking the heavy lift of that and trust what we go through and making sure that we're doing the best for our staff.
Screen, thank you. Senator Dockstader?
Green, Mr. Chairman, are they taking the insurance plans now for the most part? The charters?
Ms. Green, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Senator, yes, they are.
Okay, committee. Anything else for this grand panel? Well done, all of you. Very informative, and we appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to keep going. So, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. The table was
full, Mr. Chairman. I'll be super brief here. Carrie Klein with the Wyoming Public Charter School Association. And I just want to take a minute to thank you for your support and acknowledgement that public charter schools are public students. And that you are taking seriously the thought that they need to be treated equitably. So I wanted to thank you for that. Facility funding is an important piece of this. I want to thank Mr. Farmer for pointing out the uniqueness of our charter schools. They do each have a different story. They have a different purpose. They have a different way that they want to serve their students. So part of that is the facility piece, and it's probably one of the biggest investments that a charter school makes is their facility. So just wanted to let you know we're committed here at the association, working with the charter schools and you to find some answers to these challenges and to try and move forward while ensuring that the charter schools do have appropriate autonomy so that they can continue to serve their students with their mission while still acknowledging the fiduciary stewardship of what the state is investing in them. So happy to answer any questions. I did also just real quickly wanted to I got some numbers from the Wyoming Classical Academy here in Casper, and their SPED students are actually higher than the district average and the state average. So they do, I think it's certainly based upon charter to charter would be varying, and it is true that you can't go apples to apples on everything, but I think it's also not a blanket statement that they're all taking less students. So. Any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. It's always good to see you. Committee, anything? Okay, thank you so much. We're going to take further public testimony. If anyone would like to comment or provide testimony on charter schools.
Mr. Chairman, Marguerite Herman has joined us online and would like to provide comment.
Well, let's let them in, by golly.
She is joining the room now.
Okay. Would you please state your name? We know who you are, but we need it for the record. Marguerite, good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. Marguerite Herman, Laramie County resident, former school board member who had the privilege to review and approve both of the PODARE and the PASS charters. So I know something about the review process, and I will be brief. I understand you're on a tight schedule here. The concern, since the legislature decided to approve charter schools outside the review and support of school districts, the concern about that is that seemed to be, especially Ms. Hytrack made reference to the SLIB approved schools. It seemed to be an approach of approve now and work out details later. That includes facilities, but also what we now understand is underfunding for their administrative operations. It's going to take some more funding to bring that up to cost basis. And also taking a look at the resources for the state authorizing board, make sure they have enough staff, enough authority. It's important to figure out now, as the legislature seems to be poised to remove limits on new approvals, to figure out, I suggest that should include new developments and facilities, not using old district buildings or repurposed facilities, but actual new construction, which is going on now for a couple of the charter schools. Now charter schools seem to be working with new construction, so I suggest the select committee think about that. Should the authorizing board and you, select committee or the other legislative body, see those plans for the size and condition and other factors that affect the leasing costs, since the leasing costs will become the responsibility of the state. Then buildings, because the schools do plan to add classes year by year, which is what PODARE did, and it worked out for them. But you're building for a huge capacity or a larger capacity. How is the leasing going to work on that? Is it by student, by square foot? Should you approve the leasing agreement that maybe the schools are working out now? So I'm just suggesting that the select committee consider processes to require the charter schools. Again, listening to Janine talk, it looks like they're doing that for new charters, but for the already chartered schools, that as they plan to commit to building 16 classroom schools, et cetera, that they inform, but also seek some kind of review and approval, since the state's going to be responsible for those facilities, for the leasing and the maintenance. There just seems to be a piece missing, again, going back and picking up that authority, making sure if it's the authorizing board, make sure they have the authority to require the reports and to review them before they proceed past the drawing board. And anyway, and I compliment the Podair Academies and Pass Schools in Cheyenne. They've always done a great job and have been a great asset for Laramie One. And I'll stand for questions, although it sounds like these items are already on your radar, so I just thought I'd add to it.
Thank you, Ms. Herman. It's always good to see you. Appreciate your comments. Anything, committee? Okay, further public testimony. We'll come back in the room here. Anybody? Okay, we'll close public testimony. Committee, we're going to break for lunch, and we'll take an hour. So let's be back here at 1:45. And we'll finish up the last two items on our agenda at that time.